along. You know, it was like tennis, Pete Sampras. Nobody's ever going to win as many Grand Slams. Now you have two guys who are ahead of that and one knocking on the door. And so I think a lot like that.
You're a former investment banker. How does that inform and influence what you're doing and what you've done?
My generation has had to deal with a lot more challenges. That's why I think we're actually much better poised for the future. My first job in finance, the first thing that happened was long-term capital. 1998.
Out of that, and
then
one
the tech
knocking on the
bubble
door.
melted down. Then there was
so I think a lot like that.
Mutual fund trading scandal. You know, that was all like within about 5 or 6 years. And these are the things that I had to deal with as a young executive. My peers who were 20 years older didn't know how to manage in crisis. They'd only seen Black Monday.
That's why I think we're actually
they'd just been in a big bull market. It's
my
very
first job in
so
finance.
I'm very lucky people of my generation or a little bit younger have actually
had
then they had a lot more
crises.
I think that's actually good for mutual fund trading, how to cope with challenges.
That was all like within about 5 or 6
From the
years.
outside,
And these are the things that I
kind of
had to
looks
deal
like
with
you're
as a young
trying to
executive.
demolish
My peers,
the house
that
Parker built in crisis. You left Wine Advocate. You merged with one of his chief rivals, and you just hired a successor, Neil Martin.
I think what that says is all the best people want to work in our mutual fund trading has to cope with challenges, strive to create
From the outside,
these are the things that I
want to create a world-class
demolish
the best talent, and not just on the content side,
You left
on the technology side, on the digital side,
You merged
office
with one of
every
his
level.
chief rivals. You just hired a successor,
We're
Neil
looking
Martin.
popular brand of sports entertainment in the world is prepared for any swerves that come their way. So here's the story of how the WWE learned to see the swerve coming. So I spoke to Bloomberg reporters Felix Gillette.
I'm a writer for Bloomberg News for the global business team.
And Kim Basine.
And I'm the U.S. luxury reporter at Bloomberg.
To find out exactly how the WWE is positioning itself for an all-out global invasion, which starts with a massive change to their lucrative pay-per-view model.
WWE basically pioneered the pay-per-view model on cable. I remember as a kid, when the pay-per-view events came up, all of our friends would scramble around and try and get one of the parents to pay for it.
But in 2014, they took a huge risk.
They saw a little bit sooner than some of the other entertainment brands that where this whole thing was moving was away from cable and satellite television and towards on-demand streaming video apps. They made this risky decision, in essence, cannibalizing that pay-per-view model, which they had essentially built.
And after some early turbulence, it's working. Roughly 1.5 million people are paying $9.99 a month for the WWE app, making it the 5th most popular streaming OTT service. This adapt-or-die approach is in the WWE's DNA. Over the past 30 years, the company always seems to think 2 steps ahead. In the early 90s,
WWE was at its most threatened when Ted Turner took them on with WCW,
which stands for World Championship Wrestling. And back then, the WCW was winning the ratings war. So in order to compete with them,
WWE had changed its product from a family-friendly kind of cartoonish style to this really raw. That's why they called their show Raw. It was this raw style of wrestling.
With violent, outrageous, reality-inspired plot lines and aggressive personas.
From a 16-foot ladder!
And they won that fight against Ted Turner. And they bought WCW.
The early 2000s ushered in an era of testosterone-driven programming aimed at the red-blooded American male.
Bra and panties matches, and people smash each other over their head with like barbed wire bats and things like that.
Until 2015, when WWE fans started a hashtag Give Divas a Chance. Since then, WWE has hired 40 more female wrestlers, and that growing cast of female characters was part of a much larger plan.
They started to try to appeal to a broader set of people.
Let's attract more female fans. And after we've attracted more female fans, let's attract more international fans. They're broadening their base, and they're doing that in large part to make it more advertising friendly.
And not just friendly to advertisers.
They're trying to build up their fan base in China. They're trying to build up their fan base in Europe. They, already have a pretty good fan base in India.
India is a place where they already have an established wrestling culture.
Because of the gigantic Indian wrestler, the Great Khali. But there's still a lot of work to do. While the WWE set a revenue record in 2017, only 30% of it is coming from an overseas audience. And there's one person whose responsibility is to grow that number.
The buck eventually stops at Vince McMahon, no matter what's happening within WWE.
Yeah, he's a very controlling guy, and it's a very, very, very tightly scripted company.
And that goes all the way down the board to big stars' entrance music. And their outfits and things like that.
So with a CEO like McMahon always planning 2 moves ahead and an aggressive push into multiple international markets, a big issue is money.
It's hard to do all those things simultaneously without committing a huge amount of capital to it.
And that's where the WWE becomes an attractive company for buyers.
Potentially, one thing that could happen with WWE is they could benefit by being acquired by a bigger technology or telecom company, an Amazon or Facebook or a 21st Century Fox.
So with a market cap of $2.8 billion, the advantage of owning 100% of their own content, and a rapid consolidation spreading throughout the entertainment industry, it looks like the WWE is well positioned, even if there are swerves.
Our world is changing. Every day, it changes a little faster. Some changes are too small to see. Others, too big to handle. Sometimes, change feels slow. So slow, we don't even notice. Other times, it happens all at once, and we can't keep up. For our climate, Change means many things. And between too small to see and too big to handle, there is a whole world of difference. The clock is ticking. This is Bloomberg Green.
Saving the seas. This week, the deep-sea diver who stopped writing the ocean's obituary to find a solution. Enric Sala tells us why the next 10 years matter most. And globalization needs to get greener. Shipping accounts for nearly an eighth of all transport emissions. How can the industry clean up its act? Plus, protecting coastlines comes at a huge environmental cost. But one Israeli startup found a way to keep the sea out and the animals in. From London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern, and this is Bloomberg Green. After more than a decade of studying the ocean as an academic, Enric Sala realized he was writing the ocean's obituary. He quit his job and became a full-time conservationist. As an in-house explorer for National Geographic, he's clocked more than 5,000 open water dives. He's also founded Pristine Seas, a project that combines exploration, research, and media to lobby countries to protect their oceans. To date, it has helped create marine reserves equivalent to half the size of Canada. I spoke to him about his mission and why it's so urgent.
The state of the world's oceans is really bad. We have lost 90% of the large fish in the ocean. Sharks, groupers, cod, tuna. More than half of the fish stocks are overfished, which means that we are taking them out of the water faster than they can reproduce. More than half of the ocean is affected by industrial fishing, and global warming is killing coral reefs all around the world. The ocean is in a trajectory of decline.
Can you just visualize for our viewers who never get to see the kind of things you are able to see, what an ocean and healthy ecosystem looks like versus one that's next to a bustling economic and industrialized area?
Coral reefs in the United States, in the Florida Keys, are down to only 2% of what they used to be. Before, 80 to 90% of the bottom on a coral reef in the Caribbean was covered by live coral. Now, Florida Keys have only 2%. The average in the Caribbean is about 5% of the bottom covered by live coral. The rest is covered by slime and seaweed. And most of the fish you can see are this big. And it is very, very rare that if you jump into any place in the Caribbean at random, you see a shark. It's very, very rare. Now, let's go to Millennium Atoll, for example. An atoll that is uninhabited and fished south of the equator in the Central Pacific, belongs to the Republic of Kiribati. 2009, we conducted the first underwater expedition to this island, and I still remember the first time. Jumped over the side of the boat, and as soon as the bubbles cleared, I was surrounded by 15 gray reef sharks. After a couple minutes, the sharks decided that we were boring, and they went back to do their thing. And you look down, 90% of the seafloor is covered by thriving coral, and it's full of fish, and a sea turtle comes by. Now, this abundance that we rarely see anywhere except in well-managed marine reserves. This is what the ocean used to be like, and this is what we have learned from going to these pristine places.
And you write in your book that you're writing the obituary of ocean life. What's the cure?
The cure is doing less harm. Basically, there are three things that we are doing to the ocean. One is we are taking fish out of the water faster than they can reproduce. Two, we are turning the ocean warmer and more acidic because of man-made climate change. And three, we are throwing in everything that we don't want, our waste and our plastic. We need basically to reverse these trends.
Does this mean that a lot of this falls to governments and their policies?
That's a big part of it, because it is governments that regulate fishing and mineral extraction and oil extraction. It is governments that have the legal authority to create large marine reserves in the ocean. But also, local communities have an important role to play, because some of the most successful protected areas in the ocean are community-led and community-managed marine reserves. So when the fish come back, the divers come in. And that creates huge economic opportunities through ecotourism. These areas that are managed by communities are very successful because the communities have a vested interest in having as many fish as possible inside them so they can enjoy the benefits.
What from the pandemic has changed your view when it comes to protection of the environment?
Nature has given us a very strong signal of how fast it can recover if we just give it space. Everybody was fascinated by all these videos of the whales and the dolphins coming into marinas and mountain lions on the streets of Santiago in Chile, wild goats in the UK. Nature has this extraordinary ability to bounce back if we just give it space. This is why we need to protect at least 30% of the planet by 2030.
How do healthy marine ecosystems help in the fight against climate change, though?
Most people see the ocean as a victim of climate change, but the ocean can also be a solution, because we know that the more life that is in the ocean, like big fish and big whales, the more these organisms help to make the ocean productive and absorb more CO2. The kelp forest, seagrass beds, all of these are important ecosystems in the ocean that are similar to the forests on the land, that capture a lot of our carbon pollutions.
What are you most excited about in your field?
We have 10 years to fix this problem. Global fisheries catch is going down, stocks are collapsing. Business as usual means that by 2050, 90% of the coral reefs are gone, that most commercial fisheries have collapsed. That affects food security, that affects migration of people. We have 10 years to get to peak greenhouse gas emissions and then go carbon neutral by 2050. And we have 10 years to protect at least 30% of the ocean so we can restore much of this health and productivity, not just for saving biodiversity, but also saving our life support system. We are not talking about something that is apart from us. We are not apart from nature. We are a part of nature. So these 10 years are probably the most critical in the history of humanity.
The most accurate measurements of changing oceans will come from space. While Enric Sala explores what lies beneath, a new satellite is giving us data from above.
We'll learn more about our oceans and climate change, but from space. A new satellite's been launched from California. Its mission: track the accelerating rise of sea levels.
Well, the main instruments on board include a dual-frequency radar altimeter. And this is the primary instrument of the mission, and that's the one that's measuring sea surface height, significant wave height, and wind speed over the ocean. And from those measurements, we can actually have the superb measurements that we expect of sea level rise.
Data gathered from Sentinel-6 will be used alongside information from other satellites to build as complete a picture of the oceans as possible.
With a long record, we can precisely measure the acceleration. We eventually can detect new regime, tipping points. For example, if there is a runaway in the melting of Greenland or Antarctica, sea level will record this runaway change because it is an integrator of all changes that are occurring in the climate system. So we will be able to see some change, big change in the global climate.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration expects that sea level rise will increasingly threaten U.S. coastlines. One example, the southern tip of Manhattan is expected to flood 20 to 40 times a year by 2030.
11 of the 15 largest megacities are located at the coast, and this number will double. The number of people living in coastal area will double by 2060. So, knowing how much sea level is rising at the coast and how much it will rise in the future in coastal areas is as obvious. It's obviously a major goal for human beings.
Coming up, from sails to steam to oil, the shipping industry is no stranger to change. But how will it navigate the next transition? This is Bloomberg Green. From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern. This is Bloomberg Green. Now, for your roundup of this week's latest climate news, Jennifer Zabazaja has your Green in Brief.
Here's the climate news you need to know. Deforestation of the world's largest rainforest has hit a 12-year high. More than 4,000 square miles of the Amazon rainforest was destroyed in 2020. That's a 9.5% increase from a year earlier. Government data shows that destruction has soared since President Jair Bolsonaro took office and weakened environmental enforcement. The Amazon is home to millions of species and plants and is critical in the fight against climate change. Bitcoin is hitting all-time highs, but at what cost to the environment? The cryptocurrency is energy intensive, and there are concerns if it becomes mainstream. According to MIT, back in 2018, Bitcoin's carbon footprint was almost as big as Portugal's. Want to get better at tackling climate change? We'll hire more women. That's according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance. Firms with 30% or more women in top jobs tend to perform better when it comes to the environment and are more likely to set clear climate goals. Shopping online is more popular than ever now, but the price of convenience is measured in CO2, and more deliveries means more fuel burned and more packaging wasted. So what can companies do? Well, many are becoming more efficient and sourcing more clean energy for their data centers and warehouses. And England's farmers will be paid to go green after Brexit. As European subsidies are phased out, they'll get new money to encourage them to produce healthy, sustainable food. Poor farming practices are one of the leading drivers of water pollution and the loss of biodiversity. I'm Jennifer Zabazaja in New York. Anne-Marie, back to you.
The shipping industry is more than just the grease on the wheels of globalization. It's its chief enabler. 11 billion tons of goods are transported by ship each year, the biggest contributors being 2 billion tons of oil, 1 billion tons of iron ore, and 350 million tons of grain. According to the International Chamber of Shipping, 80% of Europe's imports and exports happen over the seas. And for such a vast industry, it also contributes its fair share of emissions. Shipping makes up 12% of global transport energy consumption. So how does it clean up its act? Earlier, I caught up with Bloomberg Green reporter Laura Milan about just how big of a challenge this is going to be for the industry.
One of the main issues is size. So about 90% of the world's cargo is moved by ships. So obviously changing such a huge industry is not going to be fast and it's not going to be easy. The second issue has to do with technology. So ships obviously travel for many days at sea. It's not as easy for them to refuel as it would be for a car, for example, going on a road. And the sector still hasn't found a technology that's economically viable and that's zero emissions, an equivalent to the electric batteries for cars, for example.
But actions are being put in place to make the industry a bit more environmentally friendly. Walk us through those steps that they're taking.
That's it. So there's a first step that would involve using low emission fuels or biofuels that would significantly reduce the existing emissions. And then at a regulatory level, when it comes to the policy and the governments, there are steps being made as well. I would say that the most significant ones come from the European Union, which started to track emissions a few years ago and is now looking to include shipping emissions in the emissions trading system. So that would significantly reduce and help calculate the emissions from the shipping industry. Now, China is taking similar steps. So at the moment, regions need to report shipping emissions to the central government. And finally, we have the International Maritime Organization with a pledge to reduce shipping emissions by 50% in 2050. Now, we must say that that pledge has been considered insufficient by environmental groups, but at least some steps are being taken.
So to get to 2050, the industry obviously is going to need to start tapping some new technologies. What new technologies are you seeing being introduced into the shipping industry?
So we have seen pilot technologies being developed for years now, but what's interesting about this current moment is that we're seeing big players invest in these technologies that are not yet economically viable, but that one day might be. So for example, we are seeing earlier this year, the world's largest agricultural commodities trader, Cargill, saying they will invest in attaching sails to their ships so they can make any technology that they run their ships on more efficient. Similarly, we have seen a spin-off of Airbus, the aeronautics company, developing a similar application with kites. We have been following also developments in hydrogen. So at the moment, hydrogen fuel seems like a good option, a possible option when it has been developed and when it becomes economically viable. And we have Vestas, for example, the world's largest turbine maker, developing some ships that will be able to run on hydrogen in the near future.
Coming up, rising sea levels means humans need to get creative when it comes to coastal defenses. But how do we protect both ourselves and the environment? One Israeli startup may have the answer. That's coming up next. This is Bloomberg Green. In London, I'm Anne-Marie Hordern. This is Bloomberg Green. After water, what's the resource that humans use the most? It's concrete, 3 tons a year for every person on the planet. And engineers estimate it's used twice as much as all other building materials combined. And it comes with a huge environmental cost. Concrete, not just in cities, it's a common feature on our coastlines too. And that's taking a toll on biodiversity. But one Israeli startup has found a way of making sea defenses stronger and encouraging life to thrive.
If you take a look at concrete structures like breakwaters or seawalls, the water around them is often clear. That's not actually a good thing, because it means there's no life. Marine species are actually most abundant in coastal areas, but it's also where us humans prefer to live too. So when we build here, we drive away marine life.
Concrete in the marine world has a lot of additives, a lot of chemicals, and some of those materials are actually leaching out, and they're actually prohibiting marine life to thrive. If we keep developing without any regards to natural communities, there is a tilting point from which beyond we cannot really go back.
In the coastal city of Tel Aviv, an Israeli startup wants to revolutionize our urban coastlines. Their sea defenses are transforming lifeless man-made structures into teeming ecosystems. They do this by replacing standard concrete with their own special cement formulas.
As opposed to regular cement-based concrete, e-concrete includes certain elements that enhance the growth of marine flora and fauna of plants and animals. Our admix, which is kind of our secret sauce, is basically kind of sealing the concrete, making it less aggressive for the marine environment. That once we add it, we enable life to flourish.
In the lab, the team run tests to identify what mixes will work best for marine life.
So we take really ice cube sized concrete slabs of different compositions, and we put larvae, 20, 30, 50. We need to have a lot of replicates. We're geeky scientists, so we have to have a lot of replication and controls. And then within a few days or just a few weeks, we can get an answer on their preference. So obviously, if they die, they have a very low tolerance to that specific concrete mix design. And if they thrive or they flourish, we can quantify that very quickly.
E-Concrete says it typically sees double the biodiversity of regular grey concrete. From fish and sea caterpillars on their armour blocks to crabs on these tidal pools that sit on the shoreline.
This unit holds water during the low tide, so it's always moist, and therefore it has a very comfortable habitat for crabs and sea anemones and sea stars, etc. These pools have been here for less than 3 months, and this is already what you can see. It's covered with life. See the rock around it, which has been here for probably 10, 20, maybe even more years, only has a thin layer of green algae, and that's it.
As well as the composition of the cement mix, E-Concrete designs its products specifically to the marine environment it will be deployed, to create niches for endangered species, or to develop nurseries like these oyster beds. The final part of the equation is creating complex surface textures to mimic natural rock or coral, an environment that helps anchor young organisms.
When concrete elements are being cast, the typical goal is to have a very slick surface, very, very smooth. The idea is to get the water to flow right across it. When we're designing E-Concrete with a rough surface, we want to do the complete opposite. We want to slow the water when they are crossing the structure so that the larvae can actually adhere and attach to the surface.
E-Concrete has to offer its clients more than just ecological credentials. Over time, they've discovered that creating hospitable habitats for marine life adds another advantage, one that is surely hard to ignore.
We've seen evidence to the fact that the growth of the organisms on the concrete create kind of a layer of defense. Just the addition of weight, we can actually gain stability and strength over time.
This is let's say the unit when we put it in the water. And this is after a year in the water. And what you can see here is all the oysters are completely covering it. We designed the units so they can withstand the forces and perform in terms of structural performance, but they can also be a backbone for ecological enhancement.
The company tests its miniature designs in tanks full of real seawater, rocks, plants, and animal life from around the world.
What we're looking for is the accumulation of calcium carbonate on the surface of the concrete of different mixes and different designs. This is the process that we call biogenic buildup. So with time, we get a buildup of calcium carbonate that is sourced from marine organisms on the surface of the concrete. And we actually encapsulate the concrete with a natural rock. So when the organism die, in the case of a coral, it will die, and then another coral will sit on it, and that's how a reef is growing.
The hope that our man-made structures could become stronger over time also means better economics. The units require less maintenance and could therefore stay in the water for longer. E-Concrete, though, is just a few years old, so it needs more time to really quantify the longevity of its products. But the company are certain their products are better for the environment, and not just in terms of improving biodiversity.
We're kind of trying to offset some of that immense carbon footprint of the concrete industry.
Construction is responsible for about 11% of global carbon emissions. By adding a biological crust to their products, E-Concrete prevents some CO2 from being released into the atmosphere.
For every kilogram of calcium carbonate being created by those marine organisms, we're offsetting 120 grams of CO2. So think about building a port infrastructure or a city waterfront that is an active carbon sink. I think that's a great advantage of the technology.
That does it for this week, but let's keep the conversation going on Twitter. Follow us at Climate. I'm Anne-Marie Hordern, and this is Bloomberg Green.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everyone. Yep, it's another Monday. Man, we are just winding down 2020. Welcome to Bloomberg Business Week. It is Monday, December 21st, and we're both in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. We're also on YouTube. Carol Masser along with Tim Stanovic. We're both kind of like, there's so much going on.
It's the end of the year. This is what happens.
I know, but it used to get quiet around holidays. I don't even remember a quiet holiday anymore.
Now, this 2020 is different for every reason.
There's a lot
Loud
going
holidays included.
Loud holidays. They'll come back hopefully in 2021. All right, we've got lots to cover over the next few hours. So let's get you going, though, on what's been already an interesting market day, because Charlie Pellet will offer off our lows today.
Well off our lows, Carol Masser. Good afternoon to the two of you. Here's where we stand right now. We have got the Dow up 52 points now, up by 0.2%. Let me get right to the numbers. I'll give you the why in a moment here. The Dow had been down as many as 423 points at the worst level of the day. That represents a drop of 1.4%. So again, to underscore, the Dow now higher by 50, up 0.2%. S&P down 14, a drop right now of 0.4%. Nasdaq is down 21, a decline there of 0.2%. We have got the 10-year up 3/32, 10-year yield 0.93%. Gold is down 0.2%, 18.77 the ounce. And with all of the lockdowns, that means less oil being used. West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.75%, 47.75 a barrel right now for WTI. So the S&P being dragged lower by losses for Tesla have been down as much as 6% on its first day after being added to the S&P 500 index. Tesla shares lower now by 4.7%. Recapping, stocks mixed. S&P down 15, down 0.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Yes, indeed. All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You are set up. Carol Masser along with Tim Stanovic. Let's get right to the Business Week agenda because there is so much to cover. Katie Greifeld is with us, cross-asset reporter at Bloomberg News. She's on the phone in Colorado. Vince Signorella, global macro strategist at Bloomberg News. He's on the phone from White Plains, New York. Vince, I'm going to start with you. We're lower, but man, it looks a lot better than it did earlier this morning. Certainly when everybody was talking about futures, we're in a much better shape.
I have to tell you, when I was having my coffee this morning and I saw futures down about 500, I thought, oh, we're going to close.
Here we go, right?
This looks awful. This is about as awful Monday as you could have. And lo and behold, we're bouncing a little bit. The feeling is that we're getting positive comments from both the WHO and FDA's former FDA Scott, Dr. Gottlieb, saying that the vaccine should be applicable to the new mutant strain we're basically seeing in the UK. The caution, of course, is the WHO said they won't know for a week. So fingers crossed it does work on this strain of the virus, but we still really don't know.
So that's what has investors concerned, Vince, is this new strain and it being more contagious and potentially, we haven't been able to get the testing, the clinical trials with the vaccine, but it all turned around when we got those comments.
Yeah, it did. But, the caution there is that it was on a very, very small sample.
Mm-hmm.
So we still don't have the full breadth of the sampling process to take place to see if it works. Yeah. And then the reality of the situation, like every virus that mutates, I joked today and said what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in London isn't going to stay in London.
Yeah, we learned that the hard way.
Despite the lockdowns, I mean, country
Yeah.
after country after country or region of the world saying, you can't come in if you're from the UK, just shutting down borders.
I mean, maybe except New Zealand.
Except New Zealand.
They were able to pull it off.
Besides what we can anticipate is a further spread around the world,
Yeah.
and this strain being more transmittable, so that it'll reach more people. So far, the positive news on that is that the fatality rate doesn't seem to be as bad. So, and anecdotally, I know some people who had the virus and were recently tested for antibodies, and they no longer have them. And the physicians said that it's approximately what they're seeing is about 8 months antibody success, and then they fade. So,
Same with the vaccine, right? This is one of the things that we're all going to try and figure out, right? How long the
Right, they're
vaccine
trying to
will-
figure out where people who've had the virus already, if they should get vaccinated, when they should get vaccinated.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's I have to say the markets are still in a major way pricing perfection. They're ignoring a lot of the bad news or potential bad news and just saying we're going to have a great spring summer, and there's no real 100% reason to believe that.
We're going to talk about this with Mike Regan a little bit. It's been a great year for stocks and a bear market for humans. It's an incredible story in Business Week. Katie, thank you for your patience. Katie Greifeld standing by. So, Katie, despite all of this COVID talk and concerns, financials, they're like dusting it off, and they're like, we're doing just fine today. Thank you very much.
Oh, big time. They're having a great day. It's actually the only sector in the green, the financial sector, even as the rest of the market comes back. I mean, that's really thanks to the Fed. They gave their blessing on buybacks resuming on late Friday. So this is the first chance the financial sector has had to react to that news. And, the Fed had put temporary caps on buybacks and dividend payments in June, but they're lifting that now after, the recent round of stress tests showed that the biggest U.S. banks have adequate capital to weather any extended downturn. I mean, if you look at what's moving under the hood of the S&P 500 as we come back, it's your usual suspects, who you would expect. It's Goldman, it's Morgan Stanley, J.P. Morgan. All of those banks are rallying big time, and they've already announced plans to resume buybacks in the coming months. And Bloomberg estimates that could unleash $11 billion worth of buybacks as they resume. So big day for the banks.
Also a big day for Tesla, not necessarily in all of the best ways. Katie, what's going on with Tesla?
Yeah, it's a tale. It's very bifurcated. You have Tesla leading losses. Occidental is down a little bit more, but as we know, Tesla is now a huge part of the S&P 500, and it's really taking a bite of the index out today. And I think this is mostly just that index effect unwinding. If you wind back to Friday, right before the close, you saw Tesla shares pop over 5% in the last few minutes of trading, just as all those funds, those $1 trillion worth of funds that follow the S&P had to buy the stock. And it popped about 5% from where it had been trading, and now Tesla's down about 4.6% today. So the rough math works out that you're seeing some of that unwind today.
Yeah, and listen, let's not forget that this is a stock that's just been on a tear this year. Vince, what are you guys hearing over on the Global Macro Squawk Desk in terms of Tesla? What kind of chatter?
Well, basically, you get back to the same old story. Is Tesla a car company or a technology company? And the market seems to want to believe they're a technology company. My own personal feeling is, and I'm so glad I don't do this for a living, because I would have gotten run over a long time ago, is it's the company always seems to me sort of one patent away from a huge problem. If somebody comes along tomorrow and creates a way more efficient battery and that has, a longer mileage run and a faster rechargeable rate, that's going to give them a lot of headaches down the road. That said, we're going electric or hydrogen, some which way, form or the other, and Tesla is well positioned, at least for now, to continue to take advantage of that.
All I'm going to say is the automakers, all of them, the global ones, have had years to figure that out, and Tesla is still way ahead of them. And if it's a smaller company, maybe Tesla just buys them up then, ultimately.
Yeah, but Tesla has such a tough road ahead of it. It has to live up to these lofty expectations, because in terms of number of vehicles that it sells a year, it is a tiny, tiny fraction of an established car company.
I'm just going to say it keeps living up to those lofty
It
expectations.
does, this year especially.
I'm just going to say, go ahead, Vince.
If we have a second, that Musk said over the weekend he's looking to put a chunk of his balance sheet, of Tesla's balance sheet, into Bitcoin.
What does that tell you?
It tells you probably better off buying Bitcoin than Tesla.
We shall see. We shall see. All right, Vince, thank you so much. Vince Signorella, Global Macro Strategist at Bloomberg. Katie Greifeld, cross-asset reporter at Bloomberg News. Let's do the Bloomberg Business Week Bite of the Day, because it's one number that tells us a lot. Today's number, Tim, 1.8 million. The first COVID-19 shots have been given to more than 1.8 million people in 5 countries, according to our data here at Bloomberg. It's the start of the biggest vaccination campaign in history, one of the largest logistical challenges ever undertaken. And yeah, you can feel it.
You really can. I mean, you can see the hiccups and the speed bumps already, but also this feeling of relief that it's happening, it's coming out.
Yeah, it definitely feels good to see some progress. All right, we've got lots to cover, folks, over the next 4 hours. So sit tight and we've just got a lot to cover. First up, though, let's go to World and National News. With that, we've got Ann Cates. She is in our D.C. bureau. Hi, Ann.
Hi there. Thank you. Good afternoon. The number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the U.S. is approaching 18 million, and the death toll has topped 318,000. A new pandemic relief bill is shaping up in Congress. The measure includes individual payments reaching $600 for most Americans and an extra $300 a week in unemployment benefits. Votes on the bill in the House and Senate are expected today. A new strain of the coronavirus in Britain could be much more infectious, and in response, more than 30 countries have banned or restricted travel from the United Kingdom. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is warning that people should limit traveling while the government figures out its next step.
Given the early evidence we have on this new variant of the virus, the potential risk it poses, it is with a very heavy heart, I must tell you, we cannot continue with Christmas as planned.
A House investigative panel says Trump administration political appointees tried to block or change more than a dozen government articles that detailed scientific findings about the spread of the coronavirus. Congressman James Clyburn says his coronavirus committee investigators have found evidence of a political pressure campaign to bully professionals at the Centers for Disease Control. Amazon has temporarily closed a New Jersey warehouse after a spike there in asymptomatic COVID-19 cases, in a rare move that comes as the company gears up for a final push in what is widely expected to be a record holiday shopping season. The Justice Department has unsealed charges against a Libyan bomb maker in the 1988 explosion of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists. I'm Ann Cates. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Ann, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Tim Stenovic. And let's get to some of the latest virus headlines because there are a lot, and I feel like it just gets more and more dire. I have to say, I like to talk to the Uber drivers, the cab drivers, the car drivers, and this one driver today said, I haven't been to the airport in 6 or 7 months to pick up anybody because there's just nobody flying in and out. The traffic isn't there.
That's wild. But it makes sense. I mean, the last flight I took was back in February or March.
Me too.
And I have no ticket to get on a flight anytime soon.
Right, exactly. Like no plans at all.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is we are seeing just among the headlines, we're talking about Pfizer and BioNTech. Am I saying it right?
BioNTech, yeah.
BioNTech.
I mean, look, that's how we hear it.
That's how I hear it. Pfizer and BioNTech, their COVID-19 vaccine won the backing of a key European review panel, so that is making its way to maybe get out in terms of that vaccine by the end of the year. But you see increasingly around Europe and the UK, anybody saying, we're not going to let people in and out of the UK at this point.
Yeah, so I have an interesting story about this that happened over the weekend. I saw we heard about this new strain over the last few days. We saw it hit a lot yesterday. So I did a video chat on WhatsApp with a friend of mine who lives in London, and I called him yesterday, and he opens up the phone, and he's in this like beautiful countryside. And I said, "Where are you? You live in London?" He said, "Oh, we escaped to France, the French countryside on Friday."
Just got out in time.
They just got out in time. And I said, well, what are the restrictions? He's like, well, we kind of just like are hanging out in this farmhouse, and we can't really go too far from where we're living, but we're fine. And it was fine at the train station to take the Channel Tunnel across. And the only issue was there were a lot of trucks lined up trying to get in and deliver supplies.
Well, and that's some of the concerns, right, in the UK about food supplies specifically. We've got a story on the Bloomberg, the UK facing a food crisis threat as the trade is being blocked between these borders. I mean, this is, the whole European area, UK included, like everything goes back and forth. And so now there's a big worry.
All happening at the end when Brexit is supposed to be complete, right?
Yeah, well.
That's the thing.
The irony,
yeah.
Exactly. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Big recovery for the U.S. stock market on this Monday. Stocks have been slumping around the world as a new variant of the coronavirus in the U.K. and a wave of lockdowns and travel restrictions damped spirits, but U.S. equities pared their decline in afternoon trading. Keep in mind that at the worst level of the morning, the S&P had been down 72 points, down 7%. Right now, the S&P is down 13, a drop there of about 0.4%. The Dow higher by 67, up by 0.2%, had been down more than 400 points at one point. Nasdaq down 23, a drop there of 0.2%. 10 years up 230 seconds, 10-year yield 0.93%. Gold down 0.2%, 18.78 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.6%, 47.79 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser, along with Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic, and a lot of headlines. Tim and I just breaking them down for some of our audiences. But what's interesting is Bloomberg does a COVID resilience ranking. It's a measure of the best places to be in the COVID-19 era, and the U.S. ranking drops steeply as we've seen the death toll surge, with one American dying from the virus every 41 seconds over the past month.
Yeah, it's been shocking to see the way that other countries have handled it so much better than we have. But that at this point is like an old story, except for the fact that it keeps getting worse here in the U.S. by many metrics.
Right, exactly. All right, so let's get into it. Global COVID-19 cases right now passing 76.8 million. So let's bring in Dr. Sophia Thomas, president of the American Association of Nurse Practitioners, a doctor of nursing practice herself, and she joins us on the phone in Louisiana, along with Bloomberg News health team editor John Lauerman. He's on the phone from Boston. So, John, I do want to start with you because Tim and I have been talking a little bit about this mutation of the virus. What do we need to know, and what do we need to know about the COVID-19 vaccine and our protection against this mutation?
Well, I would say at this point we need to know almost everything. There just isn't a lot of information out there. There have been some reports of the mutations that are in this virus. It just isn't in this particular strain. The UK government has been saying that they believe this strain spreads more easily. Moncef Slaoui, who is the scientific director of Operation Warp Speed, said in a press conference today that he hasn't seen any hard evidence of that. So I think, the jury is still out on what, exactly what this strain is, what it does, and whether it has any impact on vaccines. Now, the EMA, the European Medicines Agency, that just approved Pfizer and BioNTech's vaccine today, said that they did not believe it would have an impact on the effectiveness of that vaccine. So I think, more work is going to be needed to be done on this, but we really don't have any solid, concrete answers yet.
When will we get those solid, concrete answers? I mean, do they have to actually do a clinical trial with this new strain in order to? I don't think a clinical trial is what's needed.
I think so the way that the vaccines work, just in general, just to kind of recap, is they raise these antibodies. The antibodies are called neutralizing antibodies. They show the immune system a protein, and that sparks the development of these antibodies. And so you need to know, you can probably tell in the test tube, but whether or not these antibodies are the same antibodies that the body makes in response to the vaccine are going to neutralize this mutant strain. And then, of course, the other issue is, you'll see it in the activity of the vaccine going forward. But I don't think another clinical trial is in order right now.
All right, I want to bring in Dr. Sophia Thomas. So, Dr. Thomas, nice to have you along with John here. So, John really laying out kind of what we need to understand about this mutation and how the vaccine will protect us against it. Tell us about your observations with this news and what you're thinking about, especially when it comes to other nurse practitioners and those folks that you are working with.
Well, since COVID-19 has started, really the news has changed every day, right? We've had new news, things are trending. We learn new things literally every day. And that's why all the scientists, my hat goes off to all the scientists who are really monitoring this closely. As this continues to develop, we'll see. But I think for the most part, those of us on the front lines of healthcare will continue to do what we do every day, masking up, using our PPE, social distancing, and recommending that for our patients and the general public. You know, this virus is transmitted from person to person. There's no question about that. And the one thing that we can do to really help prevent the spread is for all of us to do our part, really be good neighbors and use the protective equipment, wash our hands, social distance, wear those masks, even just out to the grocery store. And, you know, you may be fine, you may be carrying the virus and not even realize it, but, you know, people have the risk of transmitting it to other people. And we know now that it's not just impacting the most elderly and the most sickly, although those are the significant numbers of people who are impacted, but we're having perfectly healthy people that are having suffering from complications from COVID that were, you know, unforeseen. So every day with this virus, we're learning more. We're learning more about the virus, the mutations, as well as all the downstream complications that can arise after having this.
So, Dr. Thomas, to that end, and when it comes to the vaccine, what are you advising members of the American Association of Nurse Practitioners, and when do you think they will be completely vaccinated, because they are among those who are on the front lines?
Well, we actually this week already have our colleagues that are working in hospital systems being vaccinated, and I'm so proud to see all their posts on social media. You know, we want to get the word out to the general public that we in healthcare are ready, willing, and able and happy to take this vaccine. And when your number comes up, it's certainly, we encourage everybody to get vaccinated as soon as possible. We support the CDC recommendations regarding the prioritization of the at-risk population. You know, including the frontline health workers and seniors and those with comorbid conditions. And we really look forward to not only working with the federal, state, and local authorities to ensure the most effective and efficient vaccination process possible to protect the health of patients nationwide, but we look forward to the day when all Americans can say they've been vaccinated and they're protected. You know,
Dr. Thomas, hang on for a second, because we have to do a little bit of news, but we'll come back and continue this conversation, because I want to pick up on that thought, because I want to bring John Lerman back into it, because he's got a story on the Bloomberg about vaccines don't mean we'll see the last of COVID, and we're talking about this disease maybe never being fully eradicated.
It's a scary thought, but it's also the idea that we've been living with for the last few months, which is like we just changed our lives to adapt to it. It's terrible.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll continue this conversation with Dr. Thomas, president of the American Association of Nurse Practitioners, and our own John Lerman, health team editor at Bloomberg News. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Tim Stenovic. I bet you talked about the virus a lot on Quick Take this morning.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot. I mean, this new strain, the concern over that, the vaccine news out of Europe. I think it's surprising that it's taken longer for Europe to approve it than the UK and for the US.
Right.
All
but
that.
But it's like slowly, like moving along.
Yeah.
We're going to continue that conversation with the head of the American Association of Nurse Practitioners and our own John Larriman of Bloomberg News. First up, though, Charlie Pellet.
All right. I thank you very much. It's been a fascinating day on Wall Street. 500-point move from peak to trough today. We've got the Dow now trading higher, best level of the day, up by about 100 points right now. At the worst level, the Dow had been down 423, down 1.4%, but very much in the green right now, up 0.3%. S&P, NASDAQ both remain lower. Stocks slumped around the world as a new variant of the coronavirus in the UK and a wave of lockdowns and travel restrictions damp spirits, so U.S. equities have pared their declines in afternoon trading. The S&P now lower by 9. That represents a drop of 0.3%. NASDAQ is down 16, a decline there of 0.1%. 10-year yield 0.94%. Gold is down 0.2%, down 4.07 the ounce at 18.77. West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.8%, 47.74 a barrel. Tesla shares, they are trading lower after going into the S&P 500 index. Tesla now down by 4.6%. Pfizer and BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine has won European approval, clearing the way for inoculations to start before the end of the year as the continent struggles with rising death rates and tighter lockdowns. Pfizer shares right now, they are down by 1.2%. BioNTech up 1.4%. AstraZeneca, the ADRs here in the U.S. down 1%. Moderna is higher by 0.2%. The emergence of a new strain of coronavirus in the UK is fueling angst on Wall Street. Dr. Joshua Sharfstein is vice dean at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
There are mutations that are happening in the virus, and some of them may have some sort of relevance to the virus and us. And this one seems to make the virus potentially more contagious. Other mutations may happen that have other effects. And it's important to keep an eye on it. It really shows the field of genetic epidemiology and why it's important. My guess is if it's really been spreading in London for quite a period of time, it's probably here somewhere.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Again, recapping equities trading mix. The Dow, best level right now, up 106, up 0.4. S&P down 8, down 0.2. NASDAQ down 12, a drop of 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master, along with Bloomberg Quick Takes, Tim Stenovic. Let's bring back our guest, Dr. Sophia Thomas, president of the American Association of Nurse Practitioners, on the phone from Louisiana. Also, John Larriman, health team editor at Bloomberg News. He's with us from Boston. John, I want to go back to you or kick it off with you here for this block. You've got a story on the Bloomberg about vaccines don't mean we'll see the last of COVID. You've been talking to experts. This disease is going to be with us, for a really long time, maybe forever?
Well, that's hard to say. I think the point is the vaccines that we have that are coming online for COVID right now, they look actually very good. I think that it's as we've heard, medical people want to take these vaccines and they want to protect themselves. So there's nothing wrong with the vaccine. The issue is that mass vaccination programs often take a long time. They aren't always completely successful. And as a matter of fact, we know that only one disease that's really been eradicated as a result of vaccine, and that's smallpox. But people have been trying to eliminate diseases like polio for decades, and it's just very difficult to do. It's very difficult to get everybody to take a vaccine at the same time. And when you don't have the entire population vaccinated, you have pockets of people who are unvaccinated, and then they tend to infect one another, and then other people who, for whatever reason, don't have the vaccine or decline to take the vaccine. those people become infected as well. And then, so you have this continual reservoir that can last and last. And that's basically the idea. So it's very difficult, despite the existence of effective vaccines, to actually eliminate or eradicate the disease.
So what does that mean for the future, John? Does it mean that we're going to have COVID hotspots like we do with other diseases that we've tried to eradicate? Or does it mean that it will sort of always be lurking there?
I think there's a good possibility, or at least this is what my sources told me, that it won't be eradicated. It's an extremely contagious disease. Diseases that have been eradicated, or the lone disease that's been eradicated, smallpox, is not actually all that contagious. But, as we've talked about a little bit, this new strain may be sort of more transmissible. But COVID is known to, reach people who are working 20 feet apart from each other in meatpacking plants.
God, that's terrifying.
It's a very contagious disease.
That's Dr. Thomas, I want to bring you back in because I know something that you've been focusing certainly is about some of the inequities about there. We are concerned that everybody gets access to the vaccine ultimately. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, ultimately that's the goal and that's the ideal. But as John just said, getting everybody to take that vaccine is going to be quite difficult. So COVID will probably be with us for a long time. And I'm proud to be a nurse, part of one of the most trusted professions, and I call on my nursing colleagues to encourage patients as much as possible to take it. We also don't know how long we're going to have that immunity from the vaccine, and we might be looking at a situation where we get the vaccine annually. It might be part of our annual flu vaccine. We just don't know yet. There are a lot of unknowns.
So, Dr. Thomas, what is the way that you communicate to patients, and you tell your nurse practitioners to communicate to patients that this is a vaccine that they need to get, especially when there is so much skepticism out there?
And just got about 40 seconds here.
Absolutely. The message to patients is we have a vaccine that's available that can help prevent you from getting COVID-19, hopefully prevent you from getting it and spreading it to another person. And then the message is always at the end of the day, wear a mask, social distance, practice proper infection control measures.
Right. We know over and over everyone says that that's what works. Thank you so much. Dr. Sophia Thomas, President of the American Association of Nurse Practitioners, with us on the phone from Louisiana. John Lauerman, Health Team Editor at Bloomberg News, on the phone from Boston. You can check him at Lauerman John on Twitter, and also, of course, at Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg. I think this is just when we think we've got kind of a straight path of like, okay, we're getting the vaccine, we're getting it out, it's just mutation. This is something we talked about months ago, that there was concerns about this.
Yeah, I mean, look, as John mentioned, the good news is it doesn't seem to be to get past the vaccine.
Right.
We don't know it for sure, but that's some good news.
Yeah, exactly, and let's hope it stays that way. All right, let's get back to world and national news. For that, over to Ann Cates. She's in our D.C. studio. Hi, Ann.
Hi, thanks. Good afternoon. Breaking with President Trump, Attorney General William Barr says he sees no reason to appoint a special counsel on potential election fraud or the tax investigation into the son of President-elect Joe Biden. Barr gave his final press conference as Attorney General today. New Jersey is getting fewer doses of the COVID-19 vaccines than expected. Governor Phil Murphy tells CBS this morning the state will do all it can to ensure those who are first in line get it. Now he says the state is trying to get as many doses as possible to those first in line.
I think we've got 212,000 doses coming into the state this week between Moderna and Pfizer. Somewhat less than we thought, but we're going to use every single one of them.
Trucks waiting to get out of Britain are backing up for miles, and people are stranded at airports. Many countries have imposed strict travel restrictions over concerns about a new strain of the coronavirus that authorities say may spread more easily and are halting air travel from the UK. British Health Secretary Matt Hancock says the strain is out of control around London and southeastern England, but experts have urged caution, saying it's not clear if it's actually more lethal. President-elect Joe Biden has added 3 new economic advisors to his White House team today. Biden says he will name David Kamen, a former Obama administration economic official, as deputy director of the NEC. Fewer Americans say they are feeling festive this holiday season. Just 22% say they are very or extremely festive this year, down from 49% from 1 year ago. That's according to a new poll out today from the Associated Press, which also finds that some Americans are feeling a bit sadder, lonelier, and less grateful than last year. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take. I'm Ann Cates. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Ann, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week on this Monday. Carol Massar along with Bloomberg Quick Takes, Tim Stenovic, and a couple stories we want to bring to you. Kind of both of them have a real estate angle to them, but also a virus one. When it comes to Amazon, temporarily closing its New Jersey warehouse after a spike there in asymptomatic COVID-19 cases, a rare move that comes as the company gears up for a final push in what's widely expected to be a record holiday shopping season. I am blown away that they did this, but I'm glad to see that they did this.
I'm glad to see they did it too, and apparently it will not affect shipment times. It just goes to show how much Amazon's strategy of building these distribution centers everywhere has helped, but I'm glad they're doing it too.
Me too. They've got to protect the workers, right? That, I think have felt some pressure potentially, at least according to our reporting. In the meantime...
Yeah, there's another real estate story that just hit the Bloomberg that a lot of people are reading right now. Billionaire Rubens bet big on Manhattan's battered real estate. Carol, I have to tell you, I was wondering when I was going to see a story like this, who are the people who are trying to take advantage of Manhattan and these prices that have fallen so much over the last year, and what are they betting on?
Listen, I think about, and I don't want to use this, this isn't necessarily to describe them, but I think about vulture investors of the past, right? I mean, listen, whenever there's a crisis, whenever there's a downturn, after the financial crisis, you had, was it Blackstone and others making big property bets, right, on residential property. And so these guys, they're billionaire brothers, as you said, well-known real estate investors based in the UK, and they've spent, I think you said the number, $2.5 billion on U.S. acquisitions and financing deals this year, according to those in the know. Office, retail, hotel properties in Manhattan.
And here's the opportunity. U.S. commercial real estate deals were down 40% this year through November, according to Real Capital. And here in Manhattan, where we are, Carol, it's even worse. The plunge was 57%.
That is remarkable.
So they're getting a deal.
They're getting a deal, absolutely. And some might say that the prices beforehand were inflated. So maybe it's getting down more to realistic levels. But you just move around, and there's so many vacancies.
There are. I mean, what's the timeline for Manhattan coming back, and what does that comeback look like?
Right, and I think it will be different in terms of how the space is used, but we will certainly see. Time will tell on that one. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Check out that story at Bloomberg.com. This is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pelota. Mix Monday, kicking off a holiday-shortened trading week. We've got stocks trading mix right now. Stocks have slumped around the globe as a new variant of the coronavirus in the UK and a wave of lockdowns and travel restrictions damped spirits, though U.S. equities did pair their decline in afternoon trading. Right now, the S&P is down 10, drop there of 0.3%. The Dow is up 92 now, higher by 0.3%. At the worst level of the day, the Dow had been down 423 points, down 1.4%. NASDAQ lower by 16, a drop there of 0.1%. First day out for Tesla in the S&P 500 index. Tesla lower today by 4.9%. 10-year yield 0.94%. Gold is down 0.1%, 18.79 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.8%, 47.74 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Really appreciate that update. Well, got to say, this is our world in a headline. It's been a great year for stocks and a bear market for humans. Investors ignoring the pain of the pandemic and betting on a future where, well, we'll just let...
Maybe in the future we'll come back as stocks and not humans.
I don't know. I'll let the next two explain it all. Michael Regan is senior editor and lead blogger of Bloomberg Markets Live blog. He's with us from New Jersey. Also Bloomberg Business Week editor Joel Weber on the Access line in Brooklyn. It is that headline, Joel, just sums up our year so perfectly.
Yeah, and it's almost like you don't need to read the story, but you should, because
yes,
it puts it all in one place for you. And coming back as a stock sounds kind of terrible, but maybe not in 2020. Maybe not in 2020. This is like one of the great joys of my job is being able to like just reach out to somebody like Mike Reagan and be like, Mike, feel like we need to do some business together, and he comes back with something like this, which started with some thoughts about big numbers, and some of them are kind of humbling. So Mike, walk us through how you arrived at the story.
Yeah, Joel, I feel like the whole year we've all been sort of really had this fixation on these statistics that have just been crossing in the headlines every day. Just eye-popping numbers that we never thought we'd ever see in our lifetimes, whether it be, the millions of jobs lost and recovered, 300,000 and counting deaths from this virus. Just a lot of people talk about it as the year where all charts were broken, because if you look at so many different statistics, 2020 is just so off the map that you can't even figure out what's going on in other years. But to me, it's just been this dichotomy all year that has just, I think, been surprising and sort of alarming to a lot of people. Just how well the market's done in the face of just such heartbreaking human suffering. Not only the sickness and the deaths, but just so many people still out of work. We're still down about 10 million jobs from where we were before the pandemic. Something like 27 million people in the country that don't have enough to eat. And yet the market is acting like it's, the best of times, or at least expecting the best of times. So, we cover the markets every day, sort of every twist and turn of the tape on any given day. It just felt like a good time to step back and say, wow, what just happened this year? What is the deal with this sort of this disparity between these heartbreaking economic and human suffering statistics and these stock market statistics that are just off the charts good? So that was an attempt to sort of reconcile those two and try to just take a step back, take a breath, and write about what a bizarre year it was from that perspective.
Yeah. So here we are almost at the end of the year with a little bit of the benefit of hindsight. What has allowed the market to be so disconnected from Main Street?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. For one, obviously the Fed keeping interest rates as low as they did and sort of inoculating the corporate credit market and buying up a lot of treasuries every month. It's kind of almost, forced this risk-seeking behavior in financial markets. At the same time, for those of us who were lucky enough to keep our jobs this year, there was really no option to spend that sort of discretionary money that you would have spent on, say, taking a vacation somewhere, going to a baseball game or a concert. So, I think there's evidence that a lot of that savings ended up getting put to work in the stock market. And the rest, I think Wall Street is looking at with bug eyes, this huge savings rate that Americans had this year, and thinking that once the world is back to normal, that there's just kind of this bottleneck of demand, a bottleneck of money and savings that should get sort of trickled back, maybe even gushing back into the economy once we're all, able to go out and enjoy the world again.
But the only thing, Mike, there's a line in your story. Investors seem to be betting on a permanent shift in the structure of work and the economy. I do think, we were just talking about real estate, Tim and I, that we're seeing people buy up some distressed assets. I do think that there are going to be structural changes, whether it's retail, whether it's medicine, whether it's education, whether it's how we use real estate. I do think there's going to be things that are lasting. And I think to some extent, investors are seeing past that and incorporating that in.
I agree, Carol, and I think there's a very interesting. I'm actually recycled that stat from the story that my colleague Sarah Ponzek did early in the year. She talked to Vincent Delaware, who's a strategist at the StoneX brokerage, and he ran some numbers that showed that the companies that are least dependent on their human workforce this year just totally killed it in the stock market. Did way better than companies that are very dependent on human workforce. And it's a alarming thing to think about. I think it's a kind of a depressing thing to think about. But obviously, the stock market forever has sort of rewarded companies that are able to reduce labor costs, to cut those costs to the bone. And that phenomenon, that tendency to sort of, always improve those margins, even if it's at the expense of human workers, I think that tendency really was turbocharged this year because of the pandemic and because of this sort of acceleration in technology trends and sort of a bringing forward of the demand that a lot of companies presumably would have had in the future to sort of automate more of their workforce or to, sort of get ahead of the technology curve as a margin boosting element of their business. So, a really alarming thing to happen when we saw the job market decimated the way it was.
Mike, the other thing that's worth mentioning here is something of an outlier to the robot trend. Number 2 best performing stock in S&P 500, Etsy.
I love that.
So can you talk about that? And if you came back as a stock, would you be Etsy or something else?
Not that there's anything wrong with being Etsy, Joel Weber.
Yeah, it's an interesting sort of exception to the rule that presumably this huge rally in Etsy is a good sign for all the people knitting and potters and crafters at home. But
great source of Christmas presents in my household, just for the record.
Totally. No, but it says a lot. I mean, that just blows. It's up 329, almost 330%. Yeah. Actually, was it one of the CBS News programs? It might have been CBS Sunday or somebody showed a couple of people who just like kind of got onto Etsy recently, and it's just it's like a mother and a daughter making candles. It's pretty amazing how they just kind of find their way.
Yeah, and look, investors this year have loved the company's stock. I guess the question is, can it continue?
Yeah, well, and there's people who find something and then stick with it. Great story, Mike Regan, as always. As Joel says, I need something interesting. Hey, Mike, what are you up to? And Mike always delivers. Mike Regan is senior editor and lead blogger at Bloomberg Markets Live blog on the phone from New Jersey. Check him out at Reagan Anonymous on Twitter and also at Bloomberg.com. Joel Weber, of course, editor of Bloomberg Business Week, and you can check out the new issue at Bloomberg Business Week magazine, which is all about kind of how our work world has changed dramatically, the urban exodus.
It's my favorite cover that we've had.
Oh.
Yeah, it shows the evolution of the working person.
And the impact even, too, on the broader economy.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. Hey, for those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week, we're going to continue. If you're listening on Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, Bay State Business is coming up next. Coming up next, though, Tim and I dig into that massive stimulus package expected to be signed off by Congress and the president. So we'll get into that in just a moment, right here on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Monday, December 21st. Back to work Monday, looking at a mixed day for the U.S. equity market. The Dow higher, S&P, NASDAQ lower. We are off session highs. Stocks slumped around the world as a new variant of the coronavirus in the U.K. and a wave of lockdowns and travel restrictions damp spirits, but U.S. equities have pared their decline in afternoon trading. Right now, the S&P is down 12, a drop there of 0.3%. The Dow up 71, higher by 0.2%. At the worst level of the day, the Dow had been down 423, down 1.4%. NASDAQ down 18, a drop now of 0.1%. 10-year up 1/32, 10-year yield 0.93%. Gold down 0.2%, 18.78 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil down 2.8%, 47.74 a barrel on WTI. The health insurance company Oscar has filed confidentially with the SEC for an IPO. The House has released the text of that massive 5,500-page package of legislation that combines pandemic relief with a bill to fund government operations just hours before lawmakers are scheduled to vote on it. Megan Green is a senior fellow at Harvard Kennedy School, and she was interviewed this morning on Bloomberg Television.
This stimulus really is a stopgap. It's come really late, and it's a little lame, honestly. It's not as big as I would have liked, but it's better than no stimulus at the end of the year at all. If we had waited until the new administration had come into power, particularly if the Republicans control the Senate, then it probably would have been even smaller. So I think this was probably the best that we could have realistically hoped for.
And we will have more on stimulus coming up in just a moment, specifically winners and losers. Airlines, cruise operators, energy stocks all retreating after several countries restricted trade and travel to the United Kingdom. Among some of the airline names, UAL down 1.7%. Right now, American down 2.5%. Southwest Airlines down 0.3%, Delta down 1.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser on Bloomberg Radio.
You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week on this Monday. Carol Masser, along with Bloomberg Quick Take anchor Tim Stanovic. And listen, one of our big stories has happened over the week in the House and Senate, finally coming together on a roughly $900 billion pandemic relief plan.
With not a moment to spare.
Yeah, TikTok, everybody. Yeah. And it also includes a winner that is the 3-martini lunch. Who would have thought? So let's get into the winners and losers. Bloomberg opinion columnist Jonathan Bernstein writes about it. He joins us on the phone from San Antonio. Jonathan, good to have you here with us. You do write about it. So let's go through winners, losers. Winners here in terms of this stimulus plan.
Well, in the overall stimulus plan, the fact that it got passed at all is great for people who need relief and for everybody who needs economic stimulus, which is everybody, right? So the question is, could it have been larger? Could it have been quicker? Well, yes and yes. But then again, Senate Republicans disagreed. They didn't want even this much. So, it's a compromise. Who actually sort of won the bargaining? That's something that you're going to have to get into the details. And the truth is, none of us have read this bill yet.
What about the headline numbers that we see already, the $600 in direct payments? Because we talked about this on Quick Take earlier today. $600 for somebody who's lost their job and hasn't paid their rent in months doesn't mean much.
Yeah, I think that what you have to think about is in terms of, for people who have lost their jobs, what really matters is, first of all, extending unemployment benefits, regular state unemployment benefits, including extension for gig workers and others who don't normally qualify, and then the $300 a week additional benefits that are going to be on top of the regular benefits, which are going to take place for several weeks now. So, that's the $600 is sort of the headline, but overall, it will help stimulate the economy. How much, we don't know. That's for economists, not for me. But it's hardly the only thing. Yeah. One of the things that they got, that Democrats were able to get in exchange for the 3-martini lunch, was expanded tax credits for low-income families, extending the earned income tax credit. So that makes a huge difference to people who have working poor, people who have lost their jobs. So, you know, the $600 is, again, the headline, but it's really not the main source of aid that's going out now.
Well, and first of all, shame on you. You have not read the 5,600 pages.
You've had so much time to do it.
I opened up the PDF at the start of our broadcast because it's just going around our newsroom, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I will get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, half past never.
Yeah, half past never is right. It's interesting though, that $600. I was talking to an Uber driver this morning, and they're like, it's not enough. It's just not enough. I mean, realistically, for people, you know, the big wins for Republicans.
You know, it seems that other than the 3 martini lunch, that was not really for Republicans. That was for Donald Trump. He's the one who was driving that.
Right.
You know, there's aid to business that both parties wanted. You know, additional loans for for businesses that can keep people employed. I think Republicans had come to feel after the election that it was going to help them in Georgia to pass something. So, you know, for the Georgia special runoff elections that are coming up for the United States Senate seats.
How much of that was, I got to stop you there, because Tim and I were talking in the break about this. We were reading stuff over the weekend and talking about it. This whole idea that Mitch McConnell, you know, has kind of been dragging his feet, but then he saw what the impact of doing that in terms of more stimulus to Americans because of the virus, what that was doing on those Georgia elections.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be part of the story. The other part of the story is that there was some stuff that both parties really wanted, such as funding for the vaccine and for, you know, the states to actually administer and get the vaccine into people's arms. So if Republicans wanted that, they were going to have to do some of the things that Democrats wanted. I don't know how much of a difference it'll make in Georgia. You know, like for that, the $600 that's the headline, I'm not sure how much that makes a difference to anybody.
Can I just ask you, how does it, because I was tweeting this morning, right, there's money for the wall in there, and there's also a provision that does not allow federal money for abortions?
You know, there's a normal, the Hyde Amendment that always goes on appropriations bills, which, you know, among other things, this has the full appropriations for, you know, regular normal spending bills that were due back in September that didn't get passed until now. There's I believe the number is 30 different titles, divisions in the bill, which means that this bill is not only the stimulus and relief and all of those appropriations bills, but there's another 20 different bills that were packaged into this.
I think you're right, yeah.
Jonathan, this was, you know, this took forever. They, you know, worked into the 11th hour, almost didn't happen. What does this foreshadow for any further stimulus in, you know, the new year under a Biden administration?
You know, tell me what's going to happen in Georgia.
Yeah, it all lies. Everything. You know, it all runs through Georgia.
Yeah, I think that there will be pressure to renew some kind of aid, some kind of extended unemployment benefits if unemployment stays up. You know, last week the new filings were higher. They haven't gone down below record numbers for, what is it now, 30 weeks, whatever it is. So there's going to be pressure on that. Even if there's a Republican Senate, presumably it's going to be hard for them to say no more. Especially when funding needs to be done for other government programs, and Democrats are going to make demands, and they'll have to work out deals. You know, it's not necessarily a bad thing that these things take time and wind up in these big blow-up bills, because that's the way that you do legislation.
Win-win, net-net, Democrats, Republicans, or is it kind of even-steven? Just got about 10, 15 seconds here.
You know, you have to get into the details to really know that. Win-win for the American people that something passed.
All right. And then later on, you and I can talk about those 5,400 or 5,600 pages. Jonathan, thank you so much. Really appreciate checking in with you. Jonathan Bernstein, politics columnist at Bloomberg Opinion, on the phone from San Antonio.
You're going to need more than a 3-martini lunch to get through more than 5,000 pages of
all
this.
Right. Full transparency, I'm not going to read all
Okay, thank you. I'm not either.
And thank God our Bloomberg team certainly will go through it all. so that we can find a little bit more of what we need to know. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Let's get back to world and national news. For that, back to Ann Cates. She's in our 99.1 newsroom in the nation's capital. Hi, Ann.
Hi, thanks. Good afternoon. The death toll from COVID-19 in the U.S. has topped 318,000, and there are close to 18 million confirmed cases. Votes are expected today on the $900 billion economic relief package that emerged from Congress. It will deliver vital aid to millions of households and businesses that have been struggling to survive. As the coronavirus pandemic continues to surge across the country, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee is asking state residents to wear masks and avoid holiday gatherings.
We've seen firsthand that Thanksgiving gatherings and extended time indoors have been the principal driver in spreading COVID-19 like wildfire. It only took a matter of days to see gatherings around Thanksgiving translate into a record level of sickness.
Attorney General William Barr says he sees no reason to appoint a special counsel to investigate Hunter Biden. He also unveiled charges against a Libyan bomb maker in the 1988 explosion of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, which occurred more than 3 decades ago today. About 74% of adults in the United States are overweight, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. 43% of those who are obese have a body mass index of at least 30 or higher. But more than 40% of people who are overweight and 10% of those who are obese do not perceive themselves to be fat, according to the survey, despite the potential health problems those extra pounds can cause, including heart disease, diabetes, and other health issues. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ann Cates. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Ann, thank you very much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Tim Stenovic. I kind of love these stories.
I do too.
It tells you kind of, all right, this is what's really going on in the world, everyone. Because this story by Ben Steverman and Ashwat Karmiel covering what's going on in terms of taxes and wealthy Americans. And I think you're going to talk to Ben tomorrow on Bloomberg Quick Take, right?
Yeah, that's right. Ben's going to come on and talk about one of his latest stories. Rich Americans who fear higher taxes hurry to move money now. Advisors, Carol, say they're swamped with clients who are seeking advice because they're looking to protect their assets against some tax changes that could come with a President Biden.
Right, and that's what, I mean, we've had these conversations over the last few months leading up to the election, right?
So I think that, back in September and October when it was looking like there was going to be this blue wave when Democrats were going to take the House and the Senate.
Right.
That was a much likelier conversation. But even now.
Well, this is why I was surprised, because it's like, all right, it depends on the outcome of Georgia. We won't know that until the new year.
Yeah, as we were just talking about with Jonathan, everything runs through Georgia, right?
Right. So if you need to do something, we're ticking down the days till the end of the year. You've got to do something before the end of the calendar. You got to do it.
I'm available to take any donations too. Any gifts, any annual gifts.
Send money now. You can't do that. You're Bloomberg.
Oh yeah, you're
right.
You
cannot do that.
I'm not available. I take it back.
And apparently the advisors who say that they're really busy, they're especially with helping clients transfer wealth to the next generation tax-free while they still can. That's a big deal. That happens a lot.
Yeah, it's a big deal because they're concerned that there could be retroactive changes. Now, I think the important thing to keep in mind here is what we saw when Trump became president and he pushed through the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, right? That took a long time, even when they had Republicans had full control of the House and the Senate. And it was difficult to do.
Yeah.
So doing that with a mixed Congress could be even more difficult.
And we'll see, right? Especially if it's a split Congress, nothing's going to happen. But we shall see. I mean, if the Democrats win in Georgia, we could see that there could be some. What you're shaking?
I am because members of Congress are very wealthy to begin with, and it's hard to see them raising taxes on themselves.
Yeah, so
regardless if they're Democrats or Republicans.
All right. Well, time will tell, but nonetheless, those financial advisors to the wealthy man, they are really busy. This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pelleteau. Roaring rebound for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the S&P, NASDAQ, they both remain lower. Let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. And here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. That's right. U.S. equities bounce from session lows. The Dow is currently up 22 points, was down 423. S&Ps are still down 19. NASDAQ declines by 40. The U.S. 10 yield at 0.94%. Gold is down 3, and transports fall 85 points. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, only financials were in the green. Energy led to the downside, and leaders to the upside in the Dow, Goldman Sachs, Nike, and JP Morgan, while Intel and IBM were under pressure. After earnings, Nike jumped 5% to an all-time high. And in other news, the U.S. Congress released the text of the stimulus package, and SolarWinds advisor was warned of lax security years before the recent cyber attack. In deal news, Lockheed Martin to acquire Aerojet Rocketdyne for $4.4 billion. And wrapping things up, Sinovac's COVID vaccine is shown to be effective in Brazilian trials. Live from the First Breaking Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg Type Squawk, SQUAWK on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet-Batts of Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, appreciate that update. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Masser in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, along with Tim Stenovec of Bloomberg Quick Take. And, it's interesting. I was listening to David Weston earlier, and he had on Nicholas Burns of the Harvard Kennedy School, who said that the recent cyber attack on the U.S. government and corporations and think tanks may turn out to be the largest cyber attack on the U.S. up to this point.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty significant. So we're kind of unpacking this. So let's get into it and what you need to know. With us right now is Bloomberg News cybersecurity editor Andy Martin on the phone in New Jersey, along with Neil Bridges, who's cybersecurity advisor at Root Access Protection, consultant for tech training from INE. He is on the phone from Chicago. And Andy, I want to start off with you briefly, just kind of set the stage. Where are we in terms of what we know about this? Because I know a bunch of officials, including Attorney General William Barr, said that this was likely carried out by Russia. Other administration officials have also said the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still very early days. I mean, this is was a very clever and sophisticated attack that targeted a popular software program that's used to manage IT by government agencies and companies around the world. So basically, whoever updated the software between March and June of last year may have gotten a kind of a backdoor that these hackers installed in it that they could then go back and sort of use it as a sort of staging ground for an attack. So this company SolarWinds, who produced the software, said as many as 18,000 customers may have gotten this malicious backdoor. So what's happening now is customers of SolarWinds are going into their networks. They're trying to identify whether or not they have this malicious update. And after that comes the hard part, which is trying to figure out if these hackers actually entered their network.
Right.
There's a lot of reasons that it's difficult, but one is, the way the software operates, as I understand it, is, they would have administrative credentials when they're in these networks, and they're hard to track because they look like an authorized user.
Right.
So far, it looks like it's the Russians, but again, it's early days. William Barr said that, and Mike Pompeo said that. So,
but not the president.
Says it's China.
Yeah.
But it looks like it's the Russians.
So, Neil, I want to bring you in here, cybersecurity advisor at Root Access Protection. I'm wondering, given your career, where does what we know about this hack and what you've seen thus far, where does it fall on the spectrum of what you've seen?
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate that, and thanks for having me on. I think that this definitely represents, I think, what a lot of us are calling in the industry as close to the cybersecurity Pearl Harbor as I think we've come in the number of years.
Not good.
Given, say what?
I said not good.
No, and I think you hear Andy talk about potentially 18,000 customers have installed this. Just to understand the size of this plume, SolarWinds is installed in over 300,000 environments across the globe, and that's been whittled down to just what the community's been able to detect about potentially 18,000, that could have had this malicious backdoor installed. One of the things that we have to look at, though, is that if this is indeed the Russians, if it does indeed prove to be, definitively the Russians, and this does end up being an espionage campaign, then that really only narrows it down to about probably the top 50, companies that would have allowed them to basically further their strategic advantage, from a Russian cyber attack perspective.
Yeah, it's really
Like
fascinating.
Lockheed Martin, Microsoft.
Well, and hang on for a second. I just want to tell our audience that right now, President-elect Joe Biden is getting ready to get a COVID-19 vaccine. Actually, he just got it. So just wanted to bring it to everyone. And we know various officials around the world were seeing that happen. But again, President-elect Joe Biden just getting the COVID-19 vaccine. So watching that, but also watching this cybersecurity. So, Neil, should this not have happened? SolarWinds is saying that they warned of lax security. What happened here?
I don't think it's fair to say that this shouldn't happen. I think one of the things that is critical in our industry is that we assume a breach mentality. I think.
Hey, Neil, I'm sorry. Hang on for a second. We just want to take everyone to where Joe Biden is, President-elect Joe Biden, because he is making some comments. Listen in, everyone.
My next visit. And but the important thing is that it's worth stating that, this is just the beginning. It's one thing to get the vaccine out, and now Moderna is going to be on the road as well, but it's going to take time. It's going to take time. In the meantime, I know I don't want to sound like a sour note here, but I hope people listen to all the experts when the Dr. Fauci's on, talking about the need to wear masks during this Christmas and New Year's holidays, wear masks, socially distance, and if you don't have to travel, don't travel. Don't travel. It's really important because we're still in the thick of this. It's one thing to have the vaccine show up at a hospital. There's another thing to get the vaccine from that vial into a needle, into an arm. And there's millions of people out there that are going to need this, frontline workers first. But I just want to thank everyone for all that they've done. There's some real heroes, and you're among them. Thank you.
All right, you're seeing President-elect Joe Biden. For those of you, obviously in radio, can't see this. We're just watching a live feed. President-elect Joe Biden fist bumping the healthcare individual who just administered the COVID-19 vaccine to him. So again, we're starting to see, a lot of people, and certainly our higher officials. President-elect Joe Biden, of course, older, and certainly makes sense for him to be getting that vaccine. Right?
We saw, and it absolutely does. We saw a lot of members of Congress, too, posting photos from over the weekend
Of getting it, right?
Of getting the vaccine, yeah.
All right, so watching that, of course, COVID-19, we do want to get back to our guests, and our apologies for the interruption. We are talking about this cyber attack on the U.S. government and companies. Andy Martin's still with us, cybersecurity editor at Bloomberg News. Neil Bridge is still with us, cybersecurity advisor at Root Access Protection, consultant for tech training firm INE. So, Neil, I was saying, you were talking about, and I kind of said, should this have happened? I mean, SolarWinds was there was an advisor there. This was the company that warned, his management of cybersecurity risks and had laid out a plan to improve it, but was ultimately ignored. Is it just maybe more surprising that something like this didn't happen sooner rather than now?
Absolutely, Carol, and that's what I was saying before. Is that I think what companies have to do is they have to assume a breach mentality, and this is why a focus on the people and the training is incredibly important. You cited in this instance, they didn't listen to the folks when these types of security vulnerabilities were highlighted, coming from the teams that are ultimately responsible for the security inside of SolarWinds. I think that shows just a lack of transparency and a lack of accountability at the highest levels of leadership in an organization like SolarWinds, to not be able to take that information into consideration and be able to protect not just their own data, but the valuable access that they have to over the course of the 300,000 clients that they have globally.
Yeah,
one thing I would like to ask Neil about. Sure. It was in our story today about SolarWinds. I mean, it does appear that SolarWinds had some security issues historically, where they didn't address some of the things that their cyber advisors were recommending. But, you know, these hackers, whether they're Chinese or Russian or U.S., are extremely talented. And my sense is that if they really want to get into a network, even if they would have had really good defenses, they probably could. I mean, Neil, what do you say? Your sense?
100% agree, and that's why I get back to, organizations, need to adopt a mindset that it's not a matter of if they're going to get hacked, it's a matter of when they're going to get hacked. That way they can focus on, the identification of these types of tales of when their organization may be compromised, being able to respond faster to those indicators. And then we need to have more transparency, and that needs to be driven, by consumers, by organizations, and by Wall Street, so that we get more forthcoming information about these cyber attacks, so that we can respond to them, appropriately.
So, Andy, what happens now? What do we see play out over the next few months as companies discover their vulnerabilities in the data that was accessed?
Well, I mean, I think the big question we don't know is the potential scope of this, as Neil alluded to, is huge. But we don't know what they took or what they were looking for. And I think, there's this painstaking investigative process going forward in these U.S. agencies and in private companies that were breached, to try to go and retrace the hackers' steps to figure out what they got, what they were looking for, what their motive is. We don't know what the motive is, right? We don't know what they were looking for in the Treasury Department or the Department of Homeland Security, or what might have been stolen. And so I think now the process is just trying to retrace and assess the damage.
Well, and with all due respect to that, Andy, I think we may never know what they were trying to access on the government side, but one thing's for certain is that companies like Microsoft and Cisco and some of these other large name organizations that were also impacted by this security breach, we know that these adversaries, if they were indeed on an espionage campaign, were utilizing those companies to gain access to some of these other government entities. I think that those organizations should start to look and see what interconnectivity that they have with other high-profile clients, and that would be a good indicator as to some of the other ones that they may have access to.
Gentlemen, sit tight, and we'll come back and continue the conversation. We're going to get back to Andy Martin, cybersecurity editor at Bloomberg News, Neil Bridges, cybersecurity advisor at Root Access Protection. In the meantime, let's get an update on today's trading day. Let's check in once again with Charlie Pellet.
All right. Thank you very much, Carol Master. 30 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. Just want to update you on that Oscar IPO, direct-to-consumer health insurance company Oscar has confidentially submitted a draft registration statement to the SEC relating to its proposed IPO. We are looking at an update, at least for the Dow Jones Industrial Average recovery. Really the theme here. At one point, we had the Dow down 423 points. It is up now by 25 points off session highs. The Dow had been up more than 100, but right now, looking at the Dow, we've got a gain there of 0.1%. S&P's down 18, drop there of 0.5%. Tesla, first day of inclusion in that index, weighing on the S&P. Tesla now lower by 5%. NASDAQ showing a loss of 42 points, down now by 0.3%. U.S. stocks are slumping on this back-to-work Monday afternoon, joining a global decline as a new variant of the coronavirus in the UK and a wave of lockdowns and travel restrictions dampen spirits. 10-year up 230 seconds, 10-year yield 0.93%. Gold down $4.50 the ounce, down 0.2% at 1876, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.8%, 47.74 a barrel on WTI. Pfizer and BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine have won European backing, clearing the way for inoculations to begin before the end of the year as the continent struggles with rising death rates and tighter lockdowns. Here in the United States, the vaccine rollout continues. Moments ago, you heard President-elect Joe Biden getting the shot on national TV, but there are questions about who is next in line to be getting the vaccine. Dr. Joshua Sharfstein is Vice Dean at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
Well, the CDC has a very difficult challenge trying to figure out who gets the next group of vaccines. And, the good news is within a reasonably short period of time, these distinctions won't matter because there'll be a lot more vaccine. I think they picked 75 because the rate of death is is higher, over 75, and they wanted to also include some critical essential workers who really been putting themselves in harm's way for all the rest of us.
The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Among some of the vaccine names that we track, Pfizer down today by 1.1%, BioNTech pushing higher by 1.8%, AstraZeneca, the ADR is down 1.1%, and Moderna, it is higher by 0.1%. Recapping, Dow just turning negative now, down 2 points, drop there of less than 0.1%, S&P down 0.6%. I'm Charlie Palapat. Is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, appreciate the update. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week on this Monday. Carol Massar, along with Bloomberg Quick Take anchor Tim Stenovic. And so let's get back to, we're talking about this massive cybersecurity or cyber hack attack, I should say. A wide range of government agencies and large corporations were impacted. And so let's continue with Andy Martin, cybersecurity editor at Bloomberg News. He's with us on the phone in New Jersey. Neil Bridge is still with us, cybersecurity advisor at Root Access Protection, consultant for tech training from INE, on the phone from Chicago. So I don't know, Neil, you know, what's interesting is, too, I wonder, like, what do we learn from this? You're a former member of the U.S. Air Force's, I think, Network Warfare Unit, so you served at Cyber Command there. What is it that the government now is going...
New York-based company led by CEO...
What is it that the government is going to have to do differently now and really just to make sure that our systems are secure? We're talking about really serious parts of our government that you know, were attacked and people got access to.
Absolutely, and I think the first thing is to break down a little bit of that barrier, right, is that this is another day in the office for the government, especially the network warfare teams, both on the offense and the defensive side. This just happens to be one that made it, you know, kind of bubbled up to the top from a news perspective. So you know, it is another day in the office. I think what makes this one different, right, is that it has bled over into having some real commercial impact, and I think that what that really highlights for, you know, folks who may be listening or worried about their companies or their organizations is that line between cyber warfare, you know, that the government is oftentimes engaged with, across the cyber boundaries, is now really starting to pull in a lot of, you know, household name businesses like Microsoft, like Cisco, and you may actually see that more organizations are susceptible or in those crosshairs, of being involved in this cyber warfare than probably what you're typically used to thinking about from a government-on-government perspective. But I think back to your original question, as the government starts to unpack this and see what potentially this could have had from an espionage perspective, they're looking to see, you know, what potential types of tactics they may have to change, what potential types of access that they did get inside of the Treasury or Department of Homeland Security or some of the other impacted industries or impacted areas of the government, and then take that data and try to pivot and obfuscate it and hide it more. I think what we really need to look at is, you know, the level of trust that we're putting into companies like SolarWinds and companies like Microsoft and some of these other third-party companies.
Andy, to that end, one thing that really surprised me and opened my eyes in reading about the SolarWinds hack over the last few days was the reliance that the U.S. government has on third parties, the reliance that the U.S. government has on the private sector in order to keep this data safe, because you are only as strong as your weakest link, and if the software you're using can be accessed by rogue actors, then that's not necessarily an okay thing. Does this make the U.S. government question their reliance on the private sector for this type of work?
You know, I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest. I mean, I think one of the issues we have to sort of try to address as journalists is figure out what went wrong and why the U.S. didn't have, for all the money they spent on cybersecurity, why didn't they have a way to sort of flag the fact that hackers were in their networks for months at a time? Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what the failure was. I mean, certainly, yes, they got in through this third party, but we don't understand yet why they were able to sort of stay in these networks so long undetected.
Neil, what's your thoughts on that question, and especially when you think about the government thinking about kind of its supply chain, you know, technologically?
The government's really starting to expand out its reliance on third party. If you look at some of the contracts that have happened over the last couple of years, especially as they move into some of their DoD private cloud, contract conversations between like Google and Amazon, I don't think that we're going to see a decreased reliance on the private sector. I think that with the advent of the government cybersecurity maturity model that went into effect on the 1st of December, that's a move in the right direction to try to put some more controls in place to validate some of these companies and the protections that they're putting in place. Supposedly companies like SolarWinds and Microsoft have those controls in place and are that level of compliance. But this gets back to what I was saying before, is that we have to assume that no system is impenetrable, and we have to get used to the fact that we're going to see more and more of these cyber attacks.
And can I assume that the U.S. is similarly doing this on other governments as well, Neil?
I think that that's absolutely fair. I think it's completely fair to assume that any government out there in the world, whether it's Russian, U.S., Chinese, India, France, whatever the case is, they all have offensive cyber operations going on to try to protect their national sovereignty.
Yeah.
I had a question. Do you mind if I ask Neil a question?
Go ahead.
Really quickly, though, Andy.
Neil, what's the precedent for this attack? Well, I'm trying to think of one that sort of, maybe the NotPetya attack, but is there others that you could think of that sort of resemble it in terms of its scope?
Got about 30 seconds, Neil.
Sure, absolutely. I think NotPetya is a good way to look at this from a global scale perspective. I think this is vastly different because the control that an organization like SolarWinds from a singular company has was far greater than what we saw from a NotPetya. Plus, that was very driven by financial gain by the company that, or the country that perpetuated it. This one was done for espionage, so I think the motives are vastly different.
All right, great stuff, guys. Thank you so much. That was really a wonderful deep dive into that cyber attack. Annie Martin, cybersecurity editor at Bloomberg News, on the phone from New Jersey. Neil Bridges, cybersecurity advisor at Root Access Protection, consultant for tech training firm INE, on the phone from Chicago. Get ready for more is all I'm going to say.
Yeah, turn on that two-factor authentication is what the cybersecurity experts remind everybody.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
More, the more there is, the more secure I feel in whatever. All right, we're going to leave it there. Hey, let's get a check on world and national news. Back over to Ann Cates. She's in D.C. Hey, Ann.
Hi, thanks. Good afternoon. Both houses of Congress are meeting today to pass the $900 billion pandemic relief bill, combined with a spending bill to keep government departments financed for the year ahead. The relief package provides a temporary $300 per week supplemental jobless benefit and a $600 direct stimulus payment to most Americans. President-elect Joe Biden has just received his COVID-19 vaccination at a facility in northern Delaware. The death toll from the coronavirus in the U.S. topped 318,000 today. Amazon has temporarily closed a warehouse in northern New Jersey. Amazon says it noticed an uptick in asymptomatic COVID-19 cases and will keep the facility closed until the day after Christmas out of what it calls an abundance of caution. Europe and regions from Canada to Hong Kong suspended travel links to the UK as a full lockdown came into force in London and southeast England to contain a mutation to the coronavirus. Switzerland is banning the entry of all arrivals from the UK and South Africa. Russia added to the slate of countries, halting direct flights from the UK as well. In his final press conference as Attorney General, William Barr says he believes the Kremlin was behind the cyber attack on U.S. government operations.
From the information I have, I agree with Secretary Pompeo's assessment. It certainly appears to be the Russians, but I'm not going to discuss it beyond that.
Barr adds that he sees no reason to appoint a special counsel to look at President Trump's claims of election fraud or into President-elect Biden's son, Hunter. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Ann Cates. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Ann Cates, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Massar, along with Bloomberg Quick Take anchor Tim Stenovic. Do you know that Rubin story about the billionaire Simon and David Rubin?
Yeah.
That's the number one most read story on the Bloomberg today.
Because everybody wants to know what's going to happen with Manhattan real estate.
And they're buying it up, those distressed properties, big time. Sorry, I digress. Calling a little audible there. Another story that's definitely caught our attention as well has to do with Citigroup. Citigroup promoted 70 women in its latest class of managing directors, the most ever, but still less than a third of the total. Wah, wah, wah. Not great.
No, it's not great. 29% of women in the 241-person class was a slight improvement, as you mentioned.
From 28%.
Yeah,
One
so
percentage
ever
point.
so slight, right?
Yep.
This year's class also included 5 black managing directors. That's up from 3 a year ago. I think this comes under a greater spotlight, though, because of the executive shuffle that's happening at the city, right?
Right.
Michael Corbat's leaving. Jane Frazier's coming in. She's breaking glass ceilings on Wall Street that should have been broken years ago, but the fact is it's happening now.
Right. Listen, it's great that it's happening. It's terrible that it's all happening so slowly. And I'm not trying to single out Citi. I mean, I think you could put on most people who look at the financial community and know that in terms of diversity, in terms of more women in those senior positions, it's just taking a really, really long time. And I think the more transparency, the more we read these numbers, but it also has to do with women getting into the pipeline, not just at the lower level, it's got to be at the higher level. Because typically what I always hear from recruiters is that men and women going into a financial firm, it's pretty 50-50, but as you start to go up the ladder, it just thins out when it comes to women.
I mean, has to be more support.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. And that's what I wonder with Fraser taking over as CEO.
Hopefully.
Is that going to come from the top? That kind of support is going to come from the top. And will there be meaningful differences in the types of people who actually get promoted and join those executive ranks?
Right. And deliberate actions. I think like it's one thing to talk about it, to have programs in place, but you've got to be really thinking about, okay, how do we improve that there's more women and more diversity, in terms of our employee makeup, if you will. So something to watch. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters. I'm Charlie Pellet. 13 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell. Stocks now trading lower. Do want to begin with a number of developing stories. First of all, SoftBank has filed to raise up to $525 million via a blank check IPO. Oscar, the health insurer, also filing for an IPO confidentially. And Apple shares are advancing now. Apple is up 0.9% session highs. Apple is said to be targeting 2024 to produce a passenger vehicle, that according to Reuters, which says the Apple vehicle could include its own battery technology. Again, that report from Reuters. Apple shares up now by 0.9%. Stocks are slumping as a new variant of the coronavirus in the UK and a wave of lockdowns and travel restrictions dampen sentiment. The S&P is down 20, a drop there of 0.6%. The Dow down 12, a drop there of just about less than 0.1%. Nasdaq down 37, a drop of 0.3%. 10-year up 3/30 seconds, 10-year yield 0.93%. Gold down 0.2%, 18.76 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.8%, 47.74 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no. Who's gonna drive you home? Honey, please, I'll do the driving. Drive on. Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the drive to the close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
It is time for the drive to the close. Back with us is Brian Yackman. He is Chief Investment Officer and Portfolio Manager, lead manager of the YCG Enhanced Fund. That fund, by the way, in the 96th percentile over the past 5 years, returning nearly 16% on average annually, and counts some big names that you know, MasterCard, Nike, Moody's, among some of its top holdings. Brian is based in Austin, Texas. That's exactly where we find him. Brian, nice to have you here with Tim and myself. How are you?
Well, it's great to be back. Doing really well. Enjoying the season.
Yeah, everybody's moving to Austin.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, Brian. How does it feel to be in like the coolest place in the world right now, in the U.S. for businesses, I guess?
Well, we planned it that way, of course.
Yeah, of course.
It's great. Like you could almost skip the winter months here. So we were out caroling with our kids last night, bringing cookies to neighbors and such, and you can go out in a T-shirt.
Yeah, we could not do that here. So let's talk about the market environment right now. I know you specifically look at names. So right now, where it feels like record after record, despite maybe a little bit lower today, are you finding opportunities right now, or feeling like you want to commit new money, or is it just kind of a holding strategy right now?
So I don't know if I'd say a whole lot of brand new names, but there are some names that we feel more excited about relative to others. I think that, it's no surprise to anybody that most stocks are way more expensive now. But I think it may be a little bit of a surprise to some that that's the case with some of these recovery plays, because even though their individual stock prices may be lower relative to the beginning of the year, like airlines, cruises, hotels, many of them are actually way more expensive when you look at the entire enterprise. Divided by their cash flows. And I'm not just talking like next year's cash flows, but I'm saying even beyond into the recovery. They're looking way more expensive because they've burned through so much cash and as they've incurred all these losses. And then they need to take on so much debt to survive. And these businesses, we're saying, man, they're more expensive than they were at the beginning of the year despite not having recovered.
Amazing, right?
But then you have other companies, like you just mentioned, Moody's being in our top. We started to add to S&P Global. And another one I bring up is Progressive. They've all had incredible business performance this year. But interestingly, their stocks haven't really participated and rebounded nearly as much as these others relative to the beginning of the year. I mean, they're doing well, but they're not blowing things away.
Progressive's up almost 40%. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, like their performance is killing it. But what I'm saying is when you adjust, when you look at price relative to their total. I'm looking at the total valuation, right? So their business, the stock price is up, but it's not up nearly as much as you'd expect it to be given how well it's outperformed.
Got it.
So, like, if you look at, like, the SaaS companies, you know, they've all had great performance and a lot of acceleration of demand. And their stock prices, in a lot of cases, they've gone up way faster than revenues and cash flows. You know, like the Zooms, Shopify, Datadog, Twilio, all that stuff. But these guys, what I'm saying is their performance has also been amazing, but their stock prices haven't reacted. You'd think they'd be up just as much as all those guys.
Right. That's a good point.
And I think it's because people are fearful that their good results were maybe just a one-time exceptional result, and that'll lead to a hard comparison next year. But we don't think that's necessarily the case. And really, to us, that's the kind of the perfect opportunity is when investors are saying, hey, this business is really great in the long run, but we're fearful that maybe it's going to have tough comparisons year over year. Now's not the time to buy it. Those short-term concerns usually lead to some of the best mispricing opportunities. And especially, I was just going to say, and especially if it's connected to it's such a high-quality business, high quality tends to almost perpetually be undervalued. And so we think investors are wedding both of those principles, leading to great opportunities in those companies.
What do you think of just where we are right now, big picture? You know, we're at this place where we're at the end of the year. The market has done incredibly well, but it's so disconnected from the actual real economy where millions of people are unemployed and underemployed. When is the market going to catch up to Main Street and see some sort of pullback?
Well, I think that it's, you know, there's so much liquidity sloshing around, it's obvious, and there's no question that we see evidences of what just seem to be very speculative type behavior across the board. But I think the problem is that when people are investing purely based on saying, well, I'm waiting or anticipating the pullback, I think those things are too difficult to predict. And we don't really know, could this turn into like a Japan-like environment? You know, before the whole lost decades happened in Japan, the Shiller Cape ratio, as an example, went up to about 90. We're at like a 30-something.
Yeah.
I'm not by any means saying, I think that this is not me saying I'm super bullish and I think the market's going to double from here, triple. What I'm saying is that you can go for decades with a Cape ratio being highly elevated, and with all the liquidity sloshing around, it's trying to find places to go.
Right.
And I think that the danger is people reaching for yield, trying to find it in probably some of the most dangerous places. And so we think the right move is just to own these global champions that have enduring pricing power so that you don't have to try to time the market right. You just know that you feel confident you're in a good place.
Hey, listen, just got about 45 seconds here. Wells Fargo is a name that you guys like. It's down 45% this year. When does it, and I understand, right, probably a great value play if it ultimately turns around. Is that what you're banking on?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is way cheaper than all the other great banks out there. We do own J.P. Morgan and Bank of America as well. And I think they're kind of better one-stop business models globally. But, you know, it's one of those that, yeah, it's a value play that we think is a little bit too cheap to pass up. And but unfortunately, we owned it before it became a problem. So it's not one we're proud to own, but it's one of the few contrarian plays in the portfolio.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Listen, we always love talking names with you, Brian, so thank you so much. Brian Yuckman, he's Chief Investment Officer at YCG Investments, joining us on the phone from Austin, Texas. Yeah, I mean, his portfolio reads like a who's who of kind of global corporate America.
It is, but I got to tell you,
corporate.
He's in Austin, and I'm just thinking about tacos and barbecue because those are my memories of visiting Austin.
I've never been to Austin.
It is
I have family
a great
there.
place. There's a reason all these companies are moving there. People want to live there.
I know. That's what I heard. It's got like a little bit of an East Coast feel,
It's cool.
but it's just gorgeous. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. There you have it, sound of the closing bell at the New York Stock Exchange. Folks from the U.S. Space Force virtually ringing that closing bell. Turned out to be an up day for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and what a recovery there. S&P, NASDAQ, they both declined right to the numbers. We'll give you the why in a moment here. The Dow ended the day up 37 points, a gain of 0.1%. S&P down 14, a drop of 0.4%. NASDAQ down 13, a drop there of 0.1%. 10-year up 430 seconds, 10-year yield 0.93%. Keep in mind that at the worst level of the day, the Dow had been down 423 points, representing a drop of 1.4%. The S&P was down as much as 2%. S&P ending the day lower by 0.4%. U.S. stocks slumped, joining a global decline as a new variant of the coronavirus in the United Kingdom and a wave of lockdowns and travel restrictions damped spirits. S&P 500 index was dragged lower by losses for Tesla. First day for its inclusion in the S&P 500 index today. Tesla down by 6.5%. Brian Yachman is Chief Investment Officer at YCG Investments. Moments ago, right here on Bloomberg Business Week, he offered up this advice for investors.
And I think that the danger is people reaching for yield, trying to find it in probably some of the most dangerous places. And so we think the right move is just to own these global champions that have enduring pricing power so that you don't have to try to time the market right.
And again, Tesla, first day down, first day out in the S&P today, down 6.5%. Real Page shares advanced after private equity giant Thoma Bravo agreed to buy out the maker of U.S. real estate software. Today we saw Real Page really surge, up by 28.75%. Lockheed Martin expanding its foray into futuristic space travel and missile defense by acquiring supplier Aerojet Rocketdyne Holdings. Aerojet up today by 25.5%. Lockheed Martin down 1.9%. Recapping, S&P fell 0.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Whoa, yeah, what I say.
Nobody move a muscle.
Bloomberg Business Week. Movers and shakers.
Damn, Stiffy, you got some move.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everyone, time to take a little bit of a deeper dive into today's trade. Carol Master along with Tim Stanovic of Bloomberg Quick Take, and Charlie breaking down those closing numbers. We finished just off our highs of the session. So for the S&P 500, still more of a risk-off trade today. We had 118 names in the S&P 500 higher today, 386 lower, one unchanged. Your number one decliner in the S&P 500, dun-da-da-da.
Tesla.
Tesla down 6.5%.
What a debut.
Yeah, what a debut, officially going into the S&P 500, but it's been on such a tear, ran up on Friday, and maybe not a surprise to see a little bit of a pullback here.
Yeah, look, this is a company that is just, gone up 6-7 times this year. I don't have that data in front of me, but it's been on a tear, as you mentioned.
Up 676%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, right there. I was right.
No, you were absolutely right. So just sliding on its first day of trading. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. I do want to mention among those 11 major industry groups in the S&P 500, we talked about this earlier with Katie Greifeld. Financials were your best performing group, up 1.25% on expectations and allowances for them to be, those big banks to be able to buy back their shares. Information technology just up a hair, but everything else was down. Energy, your worst performing group, down 1.8%. Let's bring in Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter Sarah Ponzak. So, Sarah, we talked a little bit about Tesla. We were also, though, I think we were all focused on stimulus. How did you see today's trade?
Right, and something else just to bring up, the fact of Tesla, like you said, what a debut, what a welcome to the S&P 500 today, the worst performing stock. At the same time, though, there are some headlines out of Apple saying that there might be an Apple car, there might be an electric vehicle Apple car. So that really weighed on Tesla into the end of the day. So we always talk about the Amazon effect, Amazon coming into your industry. Well, we saw that with Apple today, so quite the welcome for Tesla. But yeah, you look at the market as a whole today, pretty much all major industry groups were lower, major sectors, except for tech and financials, so not your typical pair there. Financials higher, though, because of news that the Fed is going to allow banks to resume their share buybacks. That sounding great to investors. So you look at some of the big banks today, you look at the best performer in the S&P 500, for example, Goldman Sachs, up 6.1%. Then you've got Morgan Stanley at 5.7%. And you run down the list and you continue to see banks like Capital One, JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citigroup. So a big boost to financials today on the back of that news, even when everything else was lower. Another thing I really want to highlight, though, is just the fact that, sure, we still got a red day, not for the Dow, but for your other major indexes. But if you look at S&P futures, we finished up 2.4% or so off of the lows that we reached overnight. So we pretty much saw this incredible rally all through the cash trading session.
Why was that? I mean, because the concerns this morning were about this new strain of the coronavirus and what it could mean for how quickly the coronavirus could spread. If it does spread more quickly, what that could mean for the lockdowns and the economy. Why did we see this comeback later in the day?
So a couple of reasons that I've seen traders and investors point to, one of them being that we saw this rebound really occur after European markets closed, and maybe European investors took their sell tickets with them. So that puts them away. At the same time, there were some headlines saying that about 50 million people in the United States will have had the first of 2 COVID-19 shots needed for immunization by the end of January. And then also just the idea that maybe there was a reconsideration of what this new strain means. As of now, there's no evidence that the new strain is going to be resistant to the vaccine. Now, of course, there's still questions. This is new. It's young. We still need confirmation. However, that's what the understanding is at this point in time. So there's still a sense then that while it might mean stricter lockdowns, stricter restrictions in the near term, this is still a market that is looking out, far out, looking ahead and looking at a time when we do have a vaccinated world, countries, states, economies, and you can still see a normalization. Right, go down the list.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty remarkable, though, the amount of news that we continue to see. Typically, I would think, or in years past, it would get a little quiet around the holidays, but you know, people continue to do deals, companies continue to do deals, and it is just kind of fascinating, Sarah, to watch this trade here.
It really is. And all year long, we have seen pretty strong trading volumes. You compare it to any other year, and this would be an astounding year. And if you just look at trading volumes today, you compare the average volume across the major benchmarks to what we have seen on average over the last 100 days or so, we actually saw above average volume. If you look at the S&P 500, volume was slightly higher than usual, but in the NASDAQ, almost 30% higher than what's been typical over the last 100 days. So yes, we are in a holiday-shortened week. Yes, people are, I'm sure, are away from their desks, although we are not for the holidays, getting ready. But at the same time, we still see this being a high-volume market, and the headlines just continue to roll in. It's not taking a pause, at least so far.
Well, I want to get your thoughts on the stimulus plan, that all more than 5,000 pages of it that has been released thus far. I know we have not been able to read it, obviously, but I'm wondering if there were any surprises in there for investors, perhaps maybe just apart from, well, I don't know. I mean, any surprises in there? It does seem like it was priced in.
What do you mean, Tim, that you haven't had time to
Yeah.
read the 5,593 page text?
Oh, there it is. Okay, 5593.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Largely, this is what was expected by investors, and that's why overnight this morning we seemingly had this sell the news reaction, showing that what we got was largely priced into markets. We have a $900 billion aid package. That was around the number that came to be expected towards the end. Sure, it's less than what we had expected maybe a couple of months ago, but it's still a very, very large aid package, and coming at a time when you kind of assume that the U.S. economy is truly going to need it, especially coming after some jobs reports, initial jobless claims reports, retail sales that all came in weaker than expected. So they got it done. We're going to get some help. But at the same time, this is largely what was going to be expected by markets and investors. And that's probably why we saw this sell the news reaction here, because it was already priced in.
Yeah, but fascinating to see us finish just off our highs of the session and I think take another leg up towards the last few minutes of trading. All right, Sarah, thank you so much. Bloomberg News cross-asset reporter Sarah Ponzak. I'm guessing that Apple story you're going to be talking about tomorrow morning. On
We are. We're frantically trying to see how much time we can spend on it because I'm in love with it.
It's going to be, I think, a huge story. That story coming from Reuters. Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
All right, you bet it. You bet. Tim Stanovic of Bloomberg Quick Take. Check him out at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning on Quick Take. Let's get back to world and national news. For that, over to Ed Baxter in San Francisco. Hey, Ed.
All right. Hey, Carol. UK COVID variants causing waves globally today. The border stop between France and Britain is threatening its food supply in the UK and its supply chain. Emergency meetings underway now. In New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo wants federal action.
Why don't we mandate testing before people get on the flight or halt the flights from the UK now? Many other countries have done this.
He says he's spoken to 3 airlines about instituting testing policies. In California, Governor Gavin Newsom is on the same train, so to speak.
I hope the federal government takes action in this space. They should. We've seen Canada. We've seen so many other jurisdictions around the world that have. In the absence of that, we'll be pursuing different strategies on testing and quarantine.
And he says he'll take action soon, although the state has seen no variant to date. He says COVID activity continues to grow. He may have to extend the stay-home orders that are set to expire at the end of the month. He also says study groups are meeting this week to set priority groups for the Moderna vaccine. Outgoing Attorney General William Barr is, he's very much distancing himself from Donald Trump, as well as contradicting him in almost step of the way now, starting with Hunter Biden.
If I thought a special counsel at this stage was the right tool and was appropriate, I would name one, but I haven't, and I'm not going to.
He also says no need to inspect voting machines, that the election is over. He also says he sides with Mike Pompeo that Russia was the player in the current massive hacking, not China. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Ed Baxter, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Radio. Carol Masser, and joining me right now is Charlie Pellet of Bloomberg News. And this story we've been watching has to do with Elon Musk. We talked about it a little bit earlier, Charlie, on air, about apparently he asked about or inquired into converting, quote, large transactions of Tesla's balance sheet into Bitcoin. He had a Twitter exchange with Michael Saylor, who's a prominent booster of the digital currency. Just when you think it couldn't get any weirder with it, Elon Musk.
Well, what a day. I mean, so much Tesla news. Obviously, first day being included in the S&P 500 index. Worth repeating, Tesla weighing on the S&P today, down by 6.5%. But in that Twitter exchange, an interesting quote going back and forth. Again, the CEO of MicroStrategy, and he encouraged the billionaire to shift dollars from the electric vehicle maker to Bitcoin, and saying, quote, do your shareholders a $100 billion favor. Numbers absolutely staggering.
Yeah, I mean, listen, just the thought of this and like, what does it mean? This guy Saylor saying other firms on the S&P 500 would follow your lead, and in time it would grow to become a $1 trillion favor. And I guess Musk was like, are such large transactions even possible? Again, we could do a table read on this back and forth. But it's like some more insight into potentially Elon Musk and his mind and how he's thinking. I don't know if the SEC, and in terms of reporting, whether or not that would be problematic. I don't know enough about this, Charlie.
Exactly. But that exchange, just to put it in context, came after Musk posted an image indicating that he is tempted by Bitcoin, which has more than tripled in value so far this year. Today, Bitcoin, by the way, down by 1/10%.
Just think of that, like if he did it and then like the Bitcoin like blossoms, right? Scott Meinert over at Guggenheim is talking about $400,000. I mean, what that would do, I guess, potentially to his balance sheet, maybe solve any money problems or concerns that he might have in the future. All right, Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. Charlie Pellet of Bloomberg News. Check out that story. You can find it on the Bloomberg and at Bloomberg.com.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. SoftBank has filed to raise up to $525 million via a blank check IPO. Reuters is reporting that Apple has targeted 2024 to produce a passenger vehicle. It was a mixed day on Wall Street. We had the Dow Jones Industrial Average eking out a gain of 0.1%, up 37 points today, ending the session at 30,216. At the worst level, the Dow had been down 423, down 1.4%. Today, though, a reversal up by 0.1. S&P down 14, a drop of 0.4%. Nasdaq down 13, a drop there of 0.1%. Stock slump joining a global decline as a new variant of the coronavirus in the UK and a wave of lockdowns and travel restrictions damp spirits. 10-year up 430 seconds, 10-year yield 0.93%. Tesla, first day out as a member of the S&P, down today by 6.5%. Gold down 0.3%, 18.76 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.8%, 47.74 a barrel. Again, recapping, S&P lower, down 14, a drop of 0.4. The Dow down 0.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, really appreciate it. We're all talking Tesla, of course. We talked about it trading lower. Its first day trading in the S&P 500. Well, someone we've talked to several times over the years is Kathy Wood, founder, CEO, and Chief Investment Officer of ARK Investment Management. She has been a longtime supporter of Tesla. Check it out.
What we saw happen over time as the naysayers were growing was Tesla's barriers to entry were increasing. Their battery technology was already 3 years. Now it's maybe 4 years ahead of the competition. The winner in autonomous is going to have the most data and the highest quality data. That company right now is Tesla.
All right, that's Kathy Wood over at ARK Investment. Let's talk a little bit more about Tesla today. Also, a great voice that we've gone to when it comes to Tesla several times over the years is Ross Gerber, President and CEO of Gerber Kawasaki Wealth and Investment Management, on the phone from Santa Monica, California. He drives a Tesla. He owns the stock. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Can't believe we're just about getting ready to wrap up this year. So Tesla,
I'm happy about that.
You and me both. If we could just fast forward about 6 or 7 months, I'd be really, really happy.
Oh my God, I'd be happy with 3.
I know. Fingers crossed, we're going to get there soon. Tesla, a little bit lower today, retracing some of the gains from Friday, when a bunch of its stock, of course, was bought by all of those index fund managers. What's your outlook for Tesla here, especially on a day, Ross, when Reuters, a headline saying Apple is moving forward with self-driving technology and targeting 2024 to produce a passenger vehicle? You laugh.
I laugh. You know, Apple just wants more pain, don't they? I'm glad that they finally could make a phone that could charge wirelessly, so I'm sure they're ready to move up to electric vehicles now. So, you know, I think what we have to understand about Tesla is nobody's close to them. Nobody can build a self-driving car like a Tesla. They don't have the data, exactly what Kathy's saying. He's built a neural net that's incredibly, like, eating up 1 million cars worth of data every day. And it's just genius the way the whole company's coming together right now. So there's nobody that's going to come close to Tesla. Tesla's in the best position they've ever been as a company between the cash on the books and the lead they have against their competition. And obviously the stock is showing that.
So, okay, so this Apple news, you're like, yeah, whatever, basically.
Oh, come on. I mean, they didn't do a TV. Apple, what they do is make headphones, okay? Like, they're really good at making headphones. But when it comes to, like, actual innovation, I think that it's not their thing.
All right. Well, I think there's a lot of people who would debate you on that. But we'll.
I own Apple. Listen, I'm an Apple shareholder. It's a huge holding. I love what they do, but they are not a huge innovative giant. They're just not.
So, and listen, we've talked with you before, about other automakers ultimately kind of stepping up. Although I do feel like we've had that conversation many times, and still, the global auto industry is lagging. But they're getting closer, and it feels like they are beginning to offer a lot more when it comes to EVs.
I would argue the opposite. I think they're getting further behind.
Really? Why?
See, what's happened, because they're still working on old battery technology now. See, the race now is battery technology. While the rest of the companies are trying to use all these old battery cells that they're going to buy from LG Chem or whatever, and they're now going to build cars with old battery technology, Tesla's already built a new battery. Now, this is like a game changer beyond game changers that most people just don't grasp. Okay, they've built a new battery that's 7 times better. It's amazing what they've done. Right. It's the biggest innovation that we've seen in so long. And so actually now every other company is building their cars on a platform that's old. And so every Tesla car that's going to be built in the new factories is going to have the new technology in it. And they're going to go so far, and they're going to be cheaper, and it's just going to wipe out the competition.
All right. So I have one other question for you. You know, in terms of Elon Musk thinking about using Bitcoin and the balance, you know, for his balance sheet, does that make you a little nervous? Like what is this?
No. What makes me nervous is when the media jumps on a story when Elon's tweeting in the middle of the night on a Saturday night making fun of Bitcoin people. Okay, that's all that was going on there. Okay, Elon, you know, I don't know.
You don't think he's serious about this?
No. Elon, I don't even think he believes in the coin. That's I think the jokes. If you really look at all his tweets, I don't think he believes in Bitcoin at all. But that's my opinion. But
yeah,
you know, Elon, his day is spent firing rockets into the air and trying to get them to land and trying to build electric cars all over the world. The last thing he needs to worry about is Bitcoin volatility, and it would add no value to Tesla at all for them to just switch money into Bitcoin, nor is it possible to do in scale.
All right.
So you know.
All right. So you kind of waved off the Apple news. You're waving off Bitcoin. What do you think investors need to be focusing on for Elon Musk for the next 6 to 12 months, Ross? Just got about 45 seconds here.
Execution. You know, one of the things that worries me is when Tesla's doing well, sometimes they get their eye off the ball a little bit. And when they're under enormous stress, they are amazingly focused. So it's really important they execute right now. So they've got, you know, 2 factories being built as we speak. They seem to be on track. They're executing very well in China right now, and that's the most important EV market in the world. So right now, execution's been right on. But that's what we're watching very closely here. And so far, everything's going as planned. So things are humming at Tesla, and I think they beat all their numbers for the quarter thanks to China.
All right, pretty remarkable. Always good to check in with you. Ross Gerber, he's president and CEO of Gerber Kawasaki Wealth and Investment Management, on the phone from Santa Monica, California. And of course, we did mention Tesla shares down about 6.5%, but man, they have just skyrocketed this year. For those of you listening in New York and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week, we're going to continue. If you're listening on Bloomberg 99.1 in DC, Sound On with Kevin Cirilli. It's coming up next.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Yes, you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week on this Monday, December 21st. Carol Masser in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio at Bloomberg headquarters in New York City. Coming up, someone we've talked to a few times over the last few months, Bishop Wayne T. Jackson, founder and CEO of the Impact Network. We're going to talk about the COVID-19 vaccine, getting it out to the Black community. We'll get to that in just a moment. First up, though, back to your top business stories. Some of the news after the close. Here is Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much. And here's what's going on. The Dow higher, S&P, NASDAQ, both lower today. Stocks slumped on this back-to-work Monday. Holiday shortened trading week, by the way. Stocks joining a global decline as a new variant of the coronavirus in the UK and a wave of lockdowns and travel restrictions damped spirits. S&P down 14, now at 36.94, a drop today of 0.4%. The Dow up 37, higher by 0.1%. Remarkable in that the worst level of the day, the Dow was down 423, down 1.4% again. End of the session with a gain of 0.1%. NASDAQ on the minus side all day, down 13 points, a drop there of 0.1%. 10-year up 4/32, 10-year yield 0.93%. Gold down 0.3%, 18.76 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude tumbled 2.8% today, down $1.36 a barrel, 47.74. Tesla was the biggest drag on the S&P 500 index in its first day of trading on the benchmark. Tesla down 6.5% today. Colin Rush is a senior analyst at Oppenheimer.
Certainly, it's a challenge for the S&P to swallow something of this size and of this volatility, but I think it's reflective of what's going on in the broader economy. And certainly, as we go forward, we're going to be watching this company closely. And I think actually, with the broader base of investors in the stock, I think there is some hope and a likelihood that the stock actually becomes less volatile here.
And again, the stock down 6.5%. Worth pointing out that year to date, Tesla is a stock that is up 676%. Shares of the biggest American banks rallied today after the Federal Reserve said Friday it would let stock buybacks resume as soon as next month, with as much as $11 billion heading to shareholders. Among some of the big bank names today, Goldman Sachs up 6.1%, Morgan Stanley up 5.7%, JP Morgan Chase up 3.7%, Citigroup also up by 3.7%. Recapping equities mix, the S&P down 14, a drop of 0.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Really appreciate that update. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser in our Interactive Broker studio in New York City. And I want to welcome back to Bloomberg Radio Bishop Wayne T. Jackson, founder and CEO of the Impact Network. It's a privately owned African-American inspirational TV network. It's got an audience of some 90 million in the United States, airing on Dish, DirecTV, Comcast, Xfinity, Charter Spectrum, Verizon Fios, and a lot more. He joins us, Bishop Jackson, that is, on the phone from Detroit. Bishop Jackson, nice to have you back with us. How are you?
Thank you. It's nice to be back. I hope everyone's staying safe.
We're trying. How's Detroit doing?
Well, Detroit, we have had a spike in the past, after the post-Thanksgiving and the holidays, people traveling and coming back and forth from visiting the relatives. And it has been a spike. It has been, matter of fact, a devastation. We lost our sheriff, one of our county sheriff, was well-known, beloved, all around the city and the county. And, he went in with COVID about maybe a week and a half ago and put him on a ventilator. Going up for him, we thought he would, maybe make that turn, but he didn't. And we have so many cases like that in the community.
Well, I just did I put out on Twitter a poll, and I just said, because I'm kind of curious, and I've seen some of the polls out there, will you get the COVID-19 vaccine? Simple question. Yes, no, still deciding. And I think there is, as you know, a lot of polling out there that when it comes to the Black community, the minority community, that people are really nervous about taking this vaccine. What are you hearing? What are you seeing?
Well, I can't speak for the whole community, but I can say this. I have taken a poll also, and I have a dual role as a pastor of a large congregation in the city of Detroit, plus the founder of the Impact Television Network, as you said, that's in over 90 million homes. So I'm in touch with a lot of pastors, African-American pastors around the country, and the consensus has been that people really are leery about that vaccine. Now, I haven't had one person that I have come in contact with that said that they want to take, the virus. Take the vaccine for the virus.
Well, no, I understand. Well, so, and listen, there's history there that you understand some of the nervousness within the Black community in terms of our past and our history, and the Black community being used basically, to test various medical treatments or without their knowing, or, it's just kind of horrific when you think about it. Is that the crux of why Black Americans are hesitant, or what are you hearing specifically about that?
Well, you go back to 1932.
Exactly.
Tuskegee situation with the syphilis and giving the Black men to see how, males to see how it would react, even though they had a cure for it, and even though they, asked him and persuaded him not to even go and get any other type of medical care, and they just died. Syphilis was a very terrible, disease that caused a lot of pain. And so the way that a lot of African Americans feel is that they feel that the government is not on their side. They feel like, that this is a government that had taken and advocated slavery and taken them from their homeland and putting them in chains and taking them over, ships and bringing them over here, stripping them of their names and giving them a different name. So it's a lot of history behind that of mistrust. And so what we have here, they thinking that, the community thinking that, you want to use me as a guinea pig. I heard people say, well, you can't get rid of the common cold, you can't get rid of the common flu, and now you take this within 7-8 months and you get a cure for something without even going through the regular protocol of even using animal testing, and now you want to put it on the people, and then they're very, very leery of it.
So what are you doing? Actually, you know what? We've got about 40 seconds. So you know what? I don't want to interrupt you. So hang on for a second, because I want you to think about, and we'll come back and talk about this. What are you doing to kind of help your community to protect them and make sure that they do get out and get the vaccine, which is so important to certainly making sure we can reduce those numbers within the Black populations. So we'll continue with that. Bishop Wayne T. Jackson is our guest. We'll get back to him in just a moment. He's founder and chief executive officer of Impact Network, joining us on the phone from Detroit. As I mentioned, it's a massive audience TV network, inspirational TV network seen around the country. So we'll get back to him in just a moment. Let's get back, though, to World and National News for an update. It's over to Ed Baxter in San Francisco. Hello there, Ed.
Hello there. I feel like a stalker, a master stalker, because I'm following you here regarding the vaccine. President-elect Joe Biden has just gotten his.
I'm doing this to demonstrate that people should be prepared when it's available to take the vaccine. There's nothing to worry about.
And Attorney General William Barr says he sees no need for a special prosecutor under Hunter Biden. Meanwhile, also breaking with Mr. Trump on elections, says it is over.
I see no basis now for seizing machines by the federal government.
And says he agrees with Mike Pompeo in saying Russia was behind the major hack, not China, as the president says. A lot of worry about the variant strain that has been identified in Britain, meanwhile, of COVID-19. The closing of borders. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says it had to be done.
We looked at where the new variant was, where it was spreading, and acted to restrict it there.
He's in meetings with France to try and figure out how to get shipments of goods, especially food, through before it becomes critical need. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio wants action now to stop a spread across the Atlantic.
In my view, it's time for a travel ban from Europe, given what we're seeing with this new strain, or at minimum, a requirement
for testing. And California Governor Gavin Newsom says he's looking at putting a quarantine in place. He says no variant cases in the state, but the things over the 14-day average are still climbing regarding COVID.
And based upon all these trend lines, it's very likely, based on those current trends, that we'll need to extend that stay-at-home order. You recall it was a 3-week order.
Yeah, now he says there was a bit of a weekend dip, but he says trending is still up. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg.
All right, now I'm stalking you, Ed. All right, Ed Baxter out there in San Francisco. Carol Massar here on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Business Week. Joining me right now is Charlie Pellet. And Charlie, this is a story, too, that I may bring up with the guest that I have on, Bishop Wayne T. Jackson, because it's looking at the inequalities we're seeing in education right now during the pandemic. We've talked about it. You and I have talked about it on air a lot. A quarter of kids do not have access to any kind of web-enabled device or broadband at home. That, just by its nature, simply just means some kids are going to fare a lot better, and unfortunately it tends to be wealthier kids are going to do better coming out of this pandemic versus those who are probably minorities living in poorer areas.
Indeed, and according to our story, parents with means are instead homeschooling, joining with other families to hire teachers in so-called pandemic pods, or signing up for private schools. That's the thrust of this story. Poor and minority children often have no choice but to attend inferior virtual classrooms, and some are just giving up entirely. The other interesting thing is this December study by consultant McKinsey that found that students of color in schools had fallen behind in math by 3 to 5 months because of the pandemic. White students trail by only 1 or 3 months.
And the worry is already U.S. public schools educate more than 50 million children, so even a modest enrollment decline could add to up to hundreds of thousands of kids being impacted as a result. I mean, there's the fear, kids falling behind, but it's also kids who just don't come back to school. They kind of just get lost in this year, Charlie, and stop going to school, and that's going to have a big impact. You know what kills me? Public schools spend $739 billion in the 2016-2017 year, about $14,000 per student. Seems like a lot of money, and yet we have such inequities out there.
Indeed. And just one other education-related note, unrelated to this, but also related, because of all the school shutdowns. Last Friday, we saw Scholastic. The stock there plunged 17%. Why? Book fair revenue plunged because schools are shut down.
I used to love the book fair. All right, Charlie, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Major deal being worked out in the fitness industry. Peloton Interactive buying fitness equipment company Precor for $420 million to gain U.S. manufacturing capabilities and new expansion opportunities. Our Mark Gurman and Jason Kelly reporting that the New York-based maker of pricey bikes and treadmills says the deal is expected to close early next year, but again, worth repeating here, Peloton buying Precor in the company's largest ever acquisition. The Dow higher today, S&P, NASDAQ declining, stocks slump joining a global decline as a new variant of the coronavirus in the UK and a wave of lockdowns and travel restrictions damp spirits. S&P was dragged lower by losses for Tesla. Today, Tesla down by 6.5%. The S&P down 14, a drop of 0.4. The Dow up 37, higher by 0.1%, completely wiping out a 423-point loss. NASDAQ down 13, a drop of 0.1%. 10-year up 2/30 seconds, 10-year yield 0.93%. Gold down 0.2%. 18.76 the ounce. Crude down 2.8%. 47.74 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. I want to get right back to Bishop Wayne T. Jackson, founder and CEO of the Impact Network, privately owned African-American inspirational TV network with an audience of some 90 million in the U.S. on Dish, DirecTV, Comcast, Xfinity, and many more. He is with us on the phone from Detroit. So Bishop Jackson, what I'm wondering now at this point, we were talking about the vaccine and the distrust that the Black community, generally speaking, has with the healthcare community because of, horrendous past, using the Black community as basically guinea pigs when it comes to testing or not providing necessary medical care. So what can you do? What can local leaders do? What can a President Biden come January or Dr. Fauci do right now to have some influence over the Black community when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine?
Well, let me say this. First of all, it's unfortunate that this is happening as far as the people who really need the help. As you know, that the death rate is very high when it comes to the African community, and they're, impacted in such a negative way when it comes to deaths, and even people who have not really who beat the COVID-19, but yet they don't have their full capacity of breathing and also being able to be normal again. So going back to your question, what can we do or what we're looking to do? And as you mentioned, the Impact Network is on every major cable and satellite provider. And so we're the only African-American faith-based Christian network, and we feel there's a responsibility to help get the message out in such a way of educating the people. When you go back to...
But what progress have you made so far? Because you would think that the Black community would trust an organization like you, but it just sounds like, and yours, excuse me, but it sounds like there is still a lot of distrust out there. So how do we kind of change that?
Well, it's going to be education. I mean, you got to educate them. And first of all, it's not going to, Vice President Pence this weekend, he got the test, and the Surgeon General, he had the test, and then Biden had not the test,
the vaccine.
Thank you.
That's okay.
The vaccine.
A lot of testing going on too, so that's fair.
Yes, right. Yeah, we've been talking about testing so long. Now we're talking about the vaccine, but it's not going to turn the minds of the average African-American on the street in the community. What you're going to have to do, we're going to have to get community leaders out. It's going to take community leaders, it's going to take the faith-based community, the pastors, because the people that sits in their pews, they trust their pastor. So it's going to have to come a long educational process to get people to really understand that the vaccine is safe. And we asked what Biden, the president-elect, could do when he becomes president. They're going to put funds out there that can, get the community aware of the vaccine, how the vaccine is safe, and things like that. It's going to take that grassroots type of effort to really change the mind of the people. Because I have not.
But it's not happening?
No, not in a way that you would want it to help.
Well, and You know what? Forgive me for interrupting, but I do wonder, Bishop Jackson, you know, and we've talked about this a lot with you. It is now 6-7 months since George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. And I do wonder, are things changing? Are we looking at the Black community differently? Are we being more inclusive? Have we moved from talk to actual action and being much more deliberate and intentional? You know, we just did a story, Charlie Pellet and I, about, it's on the Bloomberg, it's about affluent families are ditching public schools. Basically, they're doing homeschooling and they're joining with other families because they can afford to hire teachers, keep their kids safe. There are lots of individuals, many of them minorities, many of them Black, who can't afford to do that and are stuck, you know, in the public school system doing, you know, learning virtually. And again, that gap just gets wider and wider.
And we know it. And when you look at this, you look at, you know, you're talking about virtual learning. They don't even have computers. They don't even have internet. And, you know, they're falling behind. And it's always the Black, it's the African American, the people of color that suffers the most. It's just going to have to be, and I believe that Biden is going to, and this is my personal feeling, that he's going to be more sensitive to these matters, because until we get there, you talked about George Floyd. Well, George Floyd, that was a tipping point. It brought a lot of awareness, because this has been going on. It's just not started. And, you know, people say, well, you know, there's no police brutality, this and that. You know, we all train our children, me, myself, my sons, tell them, be very careful. You stop by a police officer, say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am.
You have the talk with your kids.
Yes, we do.
Well, let me ask you something. Someone's tweeting at me who's listening to our conversation, and they said, you know, do we need to have a confession and repentance by the public health system to try and rebuild trust? I mean, at some point, folks need to come out, right, and say, we screwed up, we apologize, how do we make this better in order to regain trust? What do you think needs to happen?
Well, we know, I think it was 1992 that Clinton did, President Clinton at that time, he did make an apology for the government. But it's got to be, you know, everybody don't know about that apology, but it has to be, you know, something that will ensure people that you're really sorry and you can trust me. If somebody stole something from you and, you know, a relative stole something from you and they come back again, you're going to watch them, period. They got to prove themselves, and that's what it's going to take. It's going to take them really with a sincere heart to really let them know and let the community know that we're here for you, and you're just as much as a citizen as anyone else, whether you're in the upper class, maybe a middle class, or just whatever.
Are you hopeful that Black Americans, certainly within your community, within the Impact Network, will ultimately get the COVID-19 vaccine? Just got about 45 seconds.
Well, yeah, I'm hopeful because I'm a man of faith. But again, it's going to take a lot of work. Faith without works is dead. It's going to take a lot of education, and hopefully they'll put money into the community to do the grassroots type of campaigns that we're going to need.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, and let's just hope that it ultimately works out. Bishop Wayne Jackson, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Bishop Wayne T. Jackson. He is founder and chief executive officer at Impact Network, joining us on the phone from Detroit. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and Charlie did mention a story. I just wanted to bring it out for everyone because we tend to talk a lot about this company and watch kind of what they are doing. Peloton buying Precor in the company's largest ever acquisition. They're buying a fitness equipment company, Precor, for $420 million to gain U.S. manufacturing capabilities and new expansion opportunities. So pretty interesting to see what they are doing. Shares are up about 5% in the after hours, building on their 408% gain that they have seen in 2020. So it certainly will be a name that we will be following into the Tuesday trade. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. This is Bloomberg Radio.